Chapter 4250. Boom. Xianxia's chest was hit by the punch. He bent over like a prawn and fell straight down. However, Lin Ling moved and appeared below Xianxia again. He kicked at the sky and this time, his foot landed on Xianxia's but sent Xianxia flying into the sky again. Then, there was a series of explosions. The sound of a violent battle echoed out, causing the void to fall silent. All four battlefields were now looking at the northern region. That was because it was a one-sided beating. Xianxia is a fourth-grade divine fetus and has divine light. How could he be beaten like a dog by Lin Ling? This is too unreal. Xianxia's teeth were knocked out. Could it be that Lin Ling is also a fourth-grade divine fetus? I don't think he is a fourth-grade divine fetus, but he is at least a third-grade one. Most importantly, Lin Ling's boundary essence is very fierce. It is several times stronger than Xianxia's. Everyone's face was solemn and shocked. They ignored Xianxia and stared at the blue-robed youth who was constantly attacking. That youth had disappeared for 150 years. Everyone thought that he had missed the time to cultivate and the investiture of the gods. However, Lin Ling was telling them that even if he had missed everything, he could still suppress everyone. Moreover, he was even stronger than before. At least, Lin Ling might not have been able to defeat Xianxia. This guy. Heike clenched his teeth in disbelief. Lin Ling had not been with the four gods for 100 years. Without the four gods training, Lin Ling should not be so strong. Interesting. He is still very strong. The glazed female empress narrowed her eyes. She was both surprised and felt that it was normal. She was surprised that Lin Ling, who had disappeared for 100 years, was still so strong. She felt that it was normal that Lin Ling, who was the reincarnation of Li Xiaoyao, should be so strong. Without a doubt, Lin Ling's first battle shocked the void. The four gods seemed to have exploded. Those who had underestimated Lin Ling now knew that Lin Ling was not much weaker than them. Lin Ling is so strong. On Lei Gong's side, Xianxia, Sister Zhen, and the others frowned. Especially Sister Zhen. Her expression was ugly. She was looking forward to seeing Lin Ling being beaten up miserably, causing Lei Gong to lose face. Then, Lei Gong would chase Lin Ling away in a fit of rage. But now, the one being beaten up was Xianxia. His nose was broken and his teeth were shattered. It was a miserable sight. Could it be that Lin Ling didn't bribe those people to admit defeat, but rather because they knew of Lin Ling's strength? As for Xianxia, he suddenly had a thought. At this moment, this thought spread like the tide among the crowd. Many people subconsciously looked at Wangu Yanhui and understood his painstaking efforts. As for Wangu Yanhui, he didn't pay any attention to the crowd's gazes. Instead, he stared at Xianxia, who was being brutally beaten up, and his body shuddered. He could see that Xianxia's teeth were all broken, and he subconsciously licked his teeth. Fortunately, he had admitted defeat, otherwise, he would have lost just now. The teeth that had been mended were probably going to be broken again. Admit defeat. Xianxia, who was continuously beaten up, finally spoke with difficulty. In fact, Lin Ling's methods were like a storm, and he didn't even have time to speak. As soon as the word admit defeat came out, Lin Ling looked at Xianxia with a mocking smile and left in large strides. I lost again. Looking at Lin Ling who was flying back, the man who had placed a bet before sat down powerlessly in the void. His eyes were blank. In order to win back his capital and interest, he had borrowed a large amount of treasures and paid interest. Now, he had lost again. So unless he used his life to pay it back, how could he pay it back? Haha, thank you. Master Di Luo laughed out loud, which made people feel that he was very mysterious, because this man actually knew Lin Ling's strength, which was way too scary. Unfortunately, no one knew that Lord Di Luo was just a blind cat meeting a dead mouse. He thought that Lin Ling would win, so he bet that Lin Ling would win. Fortunately, Lin Ling didn't let him down. It seems like Lin Ling will have no opponents in the northern region. Then, many people frowned and said. The previous battle had shown Lin Ling's strength. Among the 50 people, although Lin Ling wasn't the strongest, he was still one of the top. It wouldn't be difficult for him to get a place. Moreover, Lin Ling had already become the strongest in the northern region. Lin Ling, congratulations. After Lin Ling returned, Xianxia immediately said excitedly. His face was still full of surprise. Linling saw that Xianxia wasn't jealous at all. This made him feel that Xianxia was a friend worth making. He smiled and said, "You can do it too. Next, I'll wait for you to go to the 8 gods' heavenly palace together." Okay. Xianxia couldn't help but feel confident. Sister Zhen, young Lin, and the other trial takers were still looking at Linling in surprise. Only Lei Gong was calm, because he knew that Linling hadn't used his trump card yet. Now that the first place in the northern region had been confirmed, those from the Little South finally started to fight for the second place in the northern region. The other regions had more or less confirmed the first place, and many people were fighting for the second place. Number 24. At this moment, a voice came from the eastern region. Next, Xianxia, who was next to Linling, narrowed his eyes because he was number 24. "Xianxia, do your best." Linling patted Xianxia's shoulder and cheered him on. Xianxia smiled and didn't say anything. He nodded heavily and flew to the eastern region. Now that the first place in the eastern region had been confirmed, Xianxia wanted to fight for the second place. Number 7. At almost the same time, Xianxia's opponent appeared. Then, a man in heavy armor took heavy steps and flew to the eastern region like a god. "It's Emperor 13. Many people exclaimed when they saw that person. This person was the divine general of the Titanic Crescent God. Although he wasn't a trial taker, his strength was stronger than most of the trial takers. "Cripple him." Just as Emperor 13 was flying towards the void, a voice rang in his ears. Emperor 13 smiled coldly and nodded his head. The voice belonged to De. Previously, he saw that Linling and Xianxia seemed to be very close. Moreover, Linling had taught his people a lesson in the divine world. Therefore, he wanted to pay Linling back. Of course, he did not see eye to eye with Xianxia. After all, Xianxia was more powerful than him back then and had once oppressed him. Now, he naturally wanted to properly humiliate this once powerful challenger. Emperor 13. At this moment, Xianxia stared at his opponent in the northern region. He had fought and defeated Emperor 13 before. If he remembered correctly, Emperor 13's divine embryo was very destructive. It had the power of vibration. Unfortunately, Xianxia was so strong that the vibration didn't affect him at all. Bang! Chapter 42:51. Saint Guy is still a little weaker. Sigh. Linling stared at the eastern region. He could tell that Saint Guy was in trouble. After all, his divine embryo was still a grade weaker than Saint Guy. Linling couldn't help but look at the thunder god. He found that the old man looked calm, but deep in his eyes, there was a glimmer of worry. That kind of feeling was like a father watching his child go to war and worrying for his child. "Saint Guy, you must win." Sigh. This caused Linling to clench his fists. With a difference of one divine embryo, on the surface, it seemed impossible for Saint Returning Unity to win. But in a battle between martial artists, strength was not the most important factor. Instead, skill, mentality and so on were important. Now, it all depended on whether or not Saint Returning Unity could grasp this opportunity. Bang! However, Linling was about to be disappointed. After another earth-shattering clash, Saint Guy was forced back and spat out a mouthful of blood. Many people could tell that Saint Guy had lost. "I'll kill you." Sigh. To everyone's surprise, Saint Guy didn't admit defeat. He activated his Eastern Emperor Tai E bloodline and unleashed another powerful attack. Rainbow bridges shot out and countless rainbow bridges appeared in the sky. Then, these rainbow bridges formed a huge rainbow circle and enveloped Emperor 13. "This move again." Sigh. Emperor 13 laughed coldly. Cracks appeared around his body and wriggled like worms. Upon closer inspection, one could see that it was the power of vibration. Rumble. The rainbow circle enveloped Emperor 13. However, when it got close to Emperor 13, it was shattered into pieces and fell from the sky. What? Sigh. Saint Guy's eyes narrowed. Previously, Emperor 13 had been defeated by this move. Back then, Emperor 13 had begged for mercy. But now, Emperor 13 had countered it easily. Furthermore, Saint Guy could feel that Emperor 13's power of vibration was like claws and fangs. "Saint Guy, you are no longer as strong as you used to be." Sigh. At this moment, Emperor 13 took a step forward and the space in front of him shattered. Using the force of the vibrations, He entered the space and appeared in front of Xianxia. He slammed his palm forward with ferocious vibrations. For the past 100 years, he had wanted to teach Saint Guy a lesson. However, Saint Guy was Lei Gong's subordinate, so he didn't dare to act rashly. Now that he had the chance to compete for a spot, he naturally wouldn't miss this opportunity. When Saint Guy saw Emperor 13, he exclaimed in his heart, "What speed!" He could naturally sense that Emperor 13 had used the power of the tremors to reach him. Since things had come to this point, he gathered his boundary essence and used it to counter Emperor 13's attack. Boom! A translucent shock wave of dimensional essence was small at first. Then, with the two of them as the center, it rapidly expanded and gradually engulfed everything. The shock wave was circular, and when it expanded, it turned the surrounding rubble into powder. When it passed through the crowd, it immediately blew their long hair, but their eyes were still fixed on the center. When Emperor 13 and Xianxi's palms collided, cracks appeared around Emperor 13's palms. Then, the space around Emperor 13 started to vibrate like waves. Under the power of the tremors, Xianxia spat out a mouthful of blood. He also felt the terrifying power of the tremors flowing through his palms and into his entire body. It was as if his entire body had been struck by lightning. His meridians, bones, and organs all shook. "Xianxia, are you still not going to admit defeat?" Looking at Emperor 13, who was standing in front of Xianxia, he sneered maliciously. The power of the tremors in his palms grew stronger, causing Xianxia to spit out another mouthful of blood. However, just as everyone thought that the battle was over, Xianxia still refused to admit defeat. His eyes were red, as though he was risking his life. "I haven't lost yet. Rumble!" As he roared furiously, an all-powerful boundary essence suddenly erupted. The strength of the boundary essence was actually slightly denser than the boundary essence of a peak martial god. Did this guy burn his elixir field? Someone exclaimed. Burning one's boundary essence was a technique that a martial ancestor could use. However, very few people were willing to burn their boundary essence. Firstly, the side effects of burning one's boundary essence were severe. Secondly, burning one's boundary essence required some time. In a battle between experts, that short amount of time was enough to change the outcome of the battle. Although Emperor 13 was strong, he had not defeated Xianxia in one go. Therefore, Xianxia had enough time to burn his boundary essence. Of course, Emperor 13 had not expected Xianxia to be so desperate. This was because he knew that this was a self-destructive technique. If he was not careful, his divine embryo would be destroyed as well. Poor Xianxia. Burning your boundary essence is the only thing you can do? You are like a stray dog now. Emperor 13 roared as boundary essence surged out of his body. His cultivation had already surpassed the peak martial god realm and he was half a step into the deity realm. After the boundary essence surged out of his body, a surge of divine energy surged out of his body. It had increased by 100 strands of divine energy. Now, his divine energy had reached 400 strands and he was on the same level as Emperor 13. This was the vibration of the boundary essence. Boom! He was not afraid of Xianxia burning his boundary essence. He slammed his palm forward and destroyed Xianxia's boundary essence. His palm landed heavily on Xianxia's chest. "Stray dog, do you have to force me? Don't blame me if you don't admit defeat." That palm strike shattered Saint Guy's ribcage. His burning realm essence suffered a heavy blow. "I have not lost yet." However, Xianxia had to give it his all. He had already let Lord Lei Gong down the last time. This was his chance, but he had met Emperor 13, who was stronger than him. He was going to be eliminated again. He couldn't accept it. He did not want to see Lord Lei Gong's disappointed eyes. Bang! Another palm landed on Xianxia's chest and a terrifying shockwave tore Xianxia's elixir field apart. Wah! Everyone was in an uproar when they saw this. This was the most intense battle so far. Although Lin Ling had beaten up Zhong Shan not too long ago, he had only suffered superficial injuries. Now, his elixir field had been damaged. Not admitting defeat? Emperor 13 slammed his palm forward again. He was going crazy. Since Xianxia was so stubborn, he would cripple him. Rumble! Emperor 13 slammed his palm forward 7 times, causing space to shatter. Xianxia was forced to retreat. Xianxia's elixir field had been destroyed and he was now a cripple. Everyone was shocked. However, since the four gods did not say anything, no one stopped Emperor 13. The Thunder God's face was calm, as if he hadn't seen this scene. However, his eyes were trembling, and his heart was bleeding. Chapter 42:52. This child. The Thunder God muttered to himself. He thought of the past, of the little beggar he had picked up on the side of the road. Do you want to become stronger? That was what Lei Gong had said to Xianxia. Yes, I don't want to be poor anymore. As long as you can make me stronger, you will be my father. Xianxia looked at Lei Gong stubbornly. Because of that one sentence, Xianxia still saw Lei Gong as his teacher and father. He was the only one who truly wanted to work for Lei Gong. He didn't want to replace Lei Gong. Boom. At this moment, another explosion was heard. Lei Gong's eyes trembled. He finally said, I'll admit defeat for him. Deal. He knew that Xianxia wouldn't admit defeat unless he was dead. He, the Thunder God, could no longer bear to see Saint Guy suffer such torment and die before his very eyes. Since Lord Lei Gong has spoken, I will naturally give you face. Emperor 13 grabbed Xianxi's neck and hit him with his other hand. Xianxia spat out a mouthful of blood. Emperor 13 then laughed. Hee, weaklings have no right to speak. He wanted to send Xianxia flying with a slap, but a hand grabbed his arm before he could do so. Eh! Emperor 13's face changed. It happened so fast that he hadn't noticed it. He turned around and saw a man standing beside Xianxia. His blue robe was fluttering in the wind and his face was as cold as ice. Although he wasn't familiar with this person, he recognized him. He was Lin Ling, one of Lei Gong's subordinates. If we weren't fighting for a spot, I would have killed you. Lin Ling said with a murderous tone as he grabbed Emperor 13's arm. Lin Ling, don't do anything rash. However, at this time, Lei Gong's voice floated over. Lin Ling suppressed the anger in his heart. He carried Xianxia on his back and flew towards Lei Gong. Seeing this, De in the distance sneered and said indifferently, Stray dog. As for those who had a grudge against Lin Ling, seeing Lin Ling lose face, they gloated. However, Lin Ling ignored everyone's sneers. He carried Xianxia on his back and asked, Xianxia, are you feeling better? I'm sorry, I let you down. Xianxia was extremely weak. After saying those words, he fainted. However, Lin Ling could feel a drop of warm tear flowing down his neck. It was Saint Guy's tear. Xianxia had lost long ago. However, he was unwilling to admit defeat. Hence, he burned his boundary origin to win the battle. In the end, he was crippled by Emperor 13. The chances of recovering from being crippled in the martial god realm were 1 in 10,000. After all, it was extremely difficult to break through the martial god realm. Xianxia knew this himself. However, he was willing to take a gamble. Unfortunately, the outcome had disappointed him. As for Emperor 13, if he was a righteous man, he would definitely know Xianxi's intentions. He could defeat Xianxia, but he would never humiliate or cripple Xianxia. Lord Lei Gong Xianxia. Lin Ling sighed as he came before Lei Gong. Lei Gong looked deeply at Xianxia on Lin Ling's back. However, his expression did not change. He waved his hand and said, Take him to heal. All right. Although his expression did not change, he felt as if his heart was being stabbed by a knife. He wanted to kill Emperor 13. However, Xianxia did not admit defeat. This was something that everyone had witnessed. Hence, even though he hated Xianxia, there was nothing he could do. After Xianxi's defeat, the winners of the eastern region appeared. If it wasn't for Emperor 13, Xianxia would definitely have gotten a slot. Next, the winners of the western region, southern region and central region appeared. As a result, the truth of the top 10 spots was revealed. There were trial takers as well as divine generals among the top 10. Next, they would have to accept a challenge from the 40 people who had been defeated. If one of them could defeat one of the top 10, the defeated person would be stripped of his qualifications. If the challenger won, he would continue to fight. 2 challengers would be able to get a slot. This was to prevent cheating. For example, if Lin Ling had not defeated Zhongshan, everyone would have thought that he had cheated. The 10 people who will enter the 8 Gods' Heaven Palace, please come out and accept the challenge. Everyone only needs to win 1 battle to get a slot. A voice rang out. A voice rang out. Then, 10 figures flew out from all directions and stood in the middle of the void. Everyone's gazes were also fixed on the 10 people, quietly burning with passion. Among the 10 challengers, there were a few who were not very strong. Among the 50 challengers, they still had a chance to get a slot. I will challenge you, Meng Quan. You were in the western region and your opponents were not strong. At this moment, the first challenger appeared. It was the divine general from Eugene. Old Meng? It's not that I look down on you, but you are no match for me. The man called Meng Quan laughed disdainfully, then walked out. His eyes were filled with an icy light. It was obvious that the two of them had always been at odds with each other. Old Meng is an expert from the southern region. It is said that he has cultivated for tens of thousands of years and is about to break through to the martial god realm. Moreover, he has a grade 2 divine fetus and his divine energy is not weak. He is ranked in the top 300. Everyone stared at the high-spirited old Meng. As for Meng Quan, he had a grade 3 divine fetus and his divine energy was not weak either. It was just that his cultivation level was slightly lower. While the crowd was discussing, the two of them had already started to fight. The battle was extremely intense. After the time it took for 3 incense sticks to burn, old Meng was defeated and suffered some minor injuries. Do you think I am still as weak as I was in the past? Looking at the injured old Meng, Meng Quan smiled excitedly. Thank you for challenging me. Now I have obtained a slot. The 10 slots could only be challenged once. If one won, he would have a slot. Therefore, Meng Quan was naturally happy. Among the remaining challengers, there were a few who were not weak. If they challenged him, he might not be able to win. After the first place was confirmed, there were still 9 challengers left. All the challengers stared at the 9 challengers, trying to find out who was the weakest. I have always thought that the winner of the northern region depended a lot on luck. Therefore, I, Di-Shan, will challenge you. At this moment, a voice was heard. Then, a man holding a wine pot walked out with a smile. He was tall and wore heavy armor. When he gulped down the wine, he gave people a sense of heroism. Di-Shan. Chapter 42:53. However, who was he going to challenge? Currently, there were only 2 people in the northern region. One was Lin Ling, and the other was Xiao Nan. Both of them were not weak, but in the previous battle, many people still believed that Xiao Nan was more powerful. So, was Di-Shan going to challenge Lin Ling? Let's fight. Lin Ling knew that he had become a thorn in Di-Shan's side, so he spoke first. Di-Shan took a sip of wine and wanted to say something, but Lin Ling beat him to it. Excuse me, are you from the Titanic Crescent God? Di-Shan was stunned, but he nodded and said, Yes, so? Good. Get your ass over here. I'm going to teach you a lesson. Lin Ling put his hands behind his back and said calmly. His last sentence was filled with a murderous aura. Di-Shan was stunned again. He wanted to challenge Lin Ling because Di told him that he was strong enough to defeat Lin Ling, and asked him to teach Lin Ling a lesson. However, before he could say anything, Lin Ling took the initiative to teach him a lesson. Di-Shan was one of the lucky ones. Haha. Refreshing. Refreshing. All right, I'll give you a try. Di-Shan laughed and walked towards Lin Ling. It's Lin Ling. Seeing this, many people nodded. However, Lin Ling had a higher chance of winning this battle. After all, he had defeated Zhong Shan. Of course, Di-Shan could not be underestimated. He might have hidden his trump card. Lin Ling, I've heard a lot about you. It's my honor to be able to fight with you today. As your opponent, let me give you a toast. Di-Shan stood in the air and said politely. He then threw the flagon in his hand towards Lin Ling. This wine of mine is the wine of nothingness, which I obtained from the god world. If anyone else wanted a sip, I would refuse. Today, I'm giving you a toast because I think you're a hero. Di-Shan laughed politely. Of course, he also joked. However, Lin Ling, if you're afraid of being poisoned, you don't have to drink it. Anyone could tell that this was a joke. After all, Di-Shan would not dare to play with poison in front of the 4 gods unless he was a fool. Normally, when a generous man saw that Di-Shan was so hospitable, he would definitely take the wine and drink it to show that he was free and easy. Therefore, everyone thought that Lin Ling would definitely accept the wine. Bang! However, just as this thought appeared in his mind, Lin Ling punched out and shattered the wine gourd. The precious wine spilled into the air. This. Countless people opened their mouths wide. Lin Ling did not know what was good for him and did not give him face at all. Di Shan was also stunned. Then his face darkened. After all, he obtained the wine from the god world and it was extremely precious. Moreover, he had proposed a toast to Lin Ling, but Lin Ling had shattered the flagon. Do you think that everyone is qualified to drink with me? Lin Ling said indifferently with a hint of disdain while Di Shan was furious. Di Shan was furious. Let's fight. Don't talk nonsense. I'm waiting to beat you up. Lin Ling ignored Di Shan's anger. Instead, he clenched his fists tightly. Lin Ling is so arrogant. Many people were unhappy with Lin Ling's bullying. After all, not only did he break the flagon, he even said that he would beat up Di Shan. After all, Di Shan had no enmity with Lin Ling. Beat me up? Let's see if you have what it takes. Di Shan had wanted to teach Lin Ling a lesson for a long time. He was just putting on an act earlier. Then, he unleashed his realm origin, divine embryo, and divine power. Begin. After unleashing all of his power, he roared loudly. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a shadow flashed toward him and punched Di Shan's chest like a meteor. The person who appeared in front of Di Shan was Lin Ling. That punch caused Di Shan's stomach to churn. His realm origin, divine embryo, and other powers were completely unable to defend against that punch. Didn't you say that you want to see if I have what it takes? Lin Ling said indifferently while maintaining his posture. Then, he stretched out his other hand and grabbed Di Shan's neck. Then he kicked out with his knee. Rumble! The kick was powerful enough to destroy 1,000 worlds. When it landed on Di Shan's face, it broke his nose. Red, white, and yellow blood spurted out crazily. Bang! 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 Then, Lin Ling continued to beat up Di Shan in front of countless people. Di Shan's face was as red as a dye vat. Only now did he realize how big the gap was between him and Lin Ling. He could not even withstand a single blow. How ruthless! Seeing Lin Ling beating up Di Shan, the people frowned. They disliked Lin Ling even more. After all, if Di Shan was no match for Lin Ling could have defeated him. Why did he have to beat up Di Shan so fiercely? Di Shan was beaten beyond recognition. Only now did he realize that he could admit defeat. However, before Di Shan could utter the word admit defeat, Lin Ling's fist landed on his face and forced the word admit defeat back into Di Shan's stomach. Admit! Di Shan spat out a mouthful of blood. As he flew backward, he struggled to say the second word. However, before he could say the third word, Lin Ling's thunderstorm attack came again. You want to say the third word? Dream on. Rumble. In the 4 regions, Lin Ling beat Di Shan from the east to the south, then to the west and north. It was as if he was beating up a human sandbag. How could this still be considered a spar? This was clearly bullying. Could it be that Lin Ling is standing up for Xianxia? Suddenly, someone seemed to have realized something. This was because Di Shan was a member of the Titanic Crescent God. Previously, Di Shan had humiliated Xianxia. Therefore, Lin Ling was paying back an eye for an eye. This person's words made many people realize what was going on. This Lin Ling is so arrogant. Arrogant! Many of the gods on the Titanic Crescent God's side had cold looks in their eyes. Lei Gong narrowed his eyes. He understood Lin Ling's bitter smile. He did not expect Lin Ling to be so vengeful. He also did not expect Lin Ling to be such a good friend. He had only met Xianxia a few times, but Lin Ling was willing to stand up for him. Of course he was touched. He knew that Lin Ling was not only standing up for Xianxia, but also for him, Lei Gong. It's about time. After an unknown amount of time, a voice finally drifted over. This time, it was the Titanic Crescent God who had spoken. However, he still had a smile on his face. No one knew if he was angry or not. Since the Titanic Crescent God has spoken, I have to give you face. I will return the person to you. Chapter 42-54. Emperor 13's face turned gloomy when he received it. Stray dog? This was what he had said to Saint Guyi. Now, Lin Ling was using it on Di Shan. Hee hee. Hee hee. Lin Ling smiled when he saw Emperor 13's gloomy face. Although it looked like a casual smile, It was obviously a provocation. Emperor 13 gritted his teeth and carried Di Shan towards Titanic Crescent God without saying a word. Lin Ling had defeated Di Shan, which meant that he had successfully obtained a slot. This made many people jealous. Of course, many more people did not like Lin Ling. After all, Lin Ling's methods were too arrogant. Are there a lot of you who don't like me? Lin Ling seemed to know what many people were thinking and suddenly laughed. Then, without waiting for anyone to speak, he looked at the four gods and said, "How about this? The winner will also challenge. If I lose, I don't care about the slot. How about that?" What? Many people's eyes froze when they heard this. This was because Lin Ling had already obtained a slot. If he wanted to challenge someone else, wouldn't that be creating more trouble? You are already one of the top 10. Who else do you want to challenge? Are you not satisfied with torturing others? Do you want to beat up some weaklings? This time, Titanic Crescent God did not speak. Instead, it was Eugene who spoke. "I am not that bored. I just want to test my strength," Lin Ling said. "Furthermore, I am not challenging one person. I am challenging 2 people. 2 people. The crowd was in an uproar again. Was Lin Ling going to challenge 2 people by himself? Even the 4 gods' eyes narrowed. Even the god of thunder couldn't understand why Lin Ling would do such a thing. Lin Ling ignored the crowd's shock and said, "Furthermore, these 2 people are from the top 10. As soon as this sentence fell, it was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. This was because Lin Ling had fought 2 challengers at once. This was already very shocking, but who would have thought that Lin Ling would challenge a powerhouse among the top 10? One had to know that to be able to become one of the top 10 powerhouses, their strength was naturally no small matter. Could it be? Suddenly, someone seemed to have guessed something. When the others heard his shout, they immediately became aware of it. Could it be that Lin Ling wanted to fight Emperor 13? Before they could finish their thoughts, Lin Ling pointed at 2 people. He pointed at Emperor 13 and said, "One of them is you." Wah! Many people shouted. It was indeed Emperor 13. Then they started to think of the other person. However, at this moment, Lin Ling pointed again and said, "The other person is you." Following Lin Ling's finger, people realized that the second person Lin Ling wanted to fight was actually Di. He was the number 1 in the eastern region. Di's pupils constricted. He was obviously very surprised. "Do you dare?" Lin Ling stared at Di. He had a feeling that Di had something to do with Xianxia being crippled. After all, back in the realm of the gods, Di and Lin Ling had a grudge against each other. "Why not?" Di laughed. He had wanted to fight Lin Ling for a long time, but he had never had the chance. Who would have thought that Lin Ling would take the initiative to fight him? Great. Seeing this, Lin Ling laughed and said, "However, if I lose, I will also lose my place. So, if you lose, your places will also be cancelled. How about that?" Cancelled. Di and Emperor 13 suddenly frowned and did not immediately agree. "The 2 of you are fighting me alone. Are you afraid?" At this moment, Lin Ling spoke again. His words finally made Di and Emperor 13 look at each other and nod heavily. Previously, they were just a little cautious. However, after Lin Ling's reminder, they realized that it was 2 against 1. One should know that if they were alone, they were confident that they could defeat Lin Ling, let alone 2. Then, without saying much, they flew towards Lin Ling. The 4 gods were silent, but they did not stop Di and Emperor 13. Obviously, they agreed. Di and Emperor 13 appeared on the left and right of Lin Ling, surrounding Lin Ling. "Lin Ling, when we were in the realm of the gods, you exchanged a blow with me. Now that 100 years have passed, I wonder how much you have grown." Di spoke first. "You want to know?" Lin Ling did not seem to know where Di and Emperor 13 were standing and easily blocked him. Instead, he smiled faintly. "I do want to know, but I don't know if you will tell me." Di replied with a shrug. However, before Lin Ling could speak, he had already signaled Emperor 13 with his eyes. Then, the 2 of them attacked at the same time. The heavy armor on Di's body suddenly became pitch black, drowning his entire body. Only a pitch-black shadow could be seen. However, within the shadow, streaks of red light flowed along the strange patterns and into his arm, making his arm extremely dazzling. Rumble! Around him, the void suddenly shook violently. Cracks appeared continuously, and circles of black ripples bloomed like flowers. Boom! De punched out. His scorching hot arm blasted out a terrifying light pillar, which had reached the power of 400 streaks of God. Obviously, he had used his strongest attack, wanting to kill Lin Ling with one blow. At that time, even Lei Gong would not blame him. This was because Lin Ling wanted to fight 1 against 2. Moreover, De could also say that fists and kicks had no eyes. De had accidentally killed Lin Ling because he could not hold back for a moment. On the other side, Emperor 13 did not delay. His armor shook, and after the armor floated out, it immediately turned into a meteor and bombarded Lin Ling. Taking a closer look, when the meteor flew through the air, the surrounding space rippled like water. This move was obviously more powerful than the one that had defeated Xianxia. With one on the left and one on the right, Lin Ling could be said to be in imminent danger. What? At this moment, everyone finally reacted. This was because no one had expected them to suddenly attack. Now, even if Lin Ling was prepared, he might not be able to block De's attack. Moreover, Emperor 13 was eyeing him covetously. Rumble! Rumble! Unsurprisingly, after the two experts launched their attacks, Lin Ling was immediately engulfed. The void around him exploded, and a huge void tunnel appeared. It was as though it was a void tunnel that led to the outside world. One move had created a void tunnel. This showed how ferocious it was. Everyone frantically retreated. Their clothes and hair fluttered in the wind, but they stared straight ahead. Was Lin Ling dead? Chapter 42:55. Only 2 people were concerned about Lin Ling's death. One of them was Longyang. She narrowed her eyes and a complicated look flashed in them. The other one was the Thunder God. His expression didn't change, but his eyes were flickering non-stop. Brother Lei Gong, if he dies, will you blame De and the others? Suddenly, Titanic Crescent God, who had been silent, asked with a smile. No, Lei Gong said flatly, his eyes still looking forward. That's good. Titanic Crescent God laughed. However, as soon as his laughter faded, endless white lightning started raging from the black hole in front of them. The power of a grade 5 divine fetus quietly permeated the air. At this moment, many people felt the pressure increase greatly. They stared at the void passage, their eyes filled with disbelief. Lei Gong looked at the chaotic void passage in front of him and finally smiled. He said flatly, "Finally it's here." He knew that it was time for Lin Ling to use his trump card. Thunder Lock Real Body. At this moment, the entire void was silent. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the chaotic power in front of them. It was like a void catastrophe. However, an oppressive atmosphere was also spreading. Many people swallowed their saliva subconsciously. As for De and Emperor 13, they frowned. Lin Ling was still alive? How could this be? In their opinion, their move could kill any martial god realm expert, unless Lin Ling was a deity. It must be fake, Emperor 13 suddenly said. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying shockwave exploded in front of them. The shockwave was like an arc that kept expanding. Boom! When the arc hit them, De and Emperor 13's hair and clothes were blown up. Their eyes narrowed and their faces started to distort. They could not control their bodies and flew backwards. Steady! They roared and controlled their realm essence to stabilize their bodies. This was because if they fell back, they would feel extremely embarrassed. That circular shockwave grew bigger and bigger. When it spread into the distance, everyone's long hair was blown up and their pupils constricted. Is this Lin Ling's full strength? Luli Empress's eyes narrowed and flickered non-stop. No one knew what she was thinking. What the hell is this? Longyang clenched her fists tightly. The powerful force coming from afar made her feel a huge pressure. Boom! Finally, there was a roar, and all the power receded like a tide. Then, a dot of light appeared, and it kept expanding. Gradually, a dazzling figure walked out. This person was covered in lightning, and there were 8 wings flapping behind him. The wings were made of lightning, and there were ferocious electric snakes all around. This person appeared to be awe-inspiring. And he was Lin Ling. Whoosh! As soon as he appeared, Lin Ling disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in front of De. His fist smashed out like a meteor and landed on De's stomach. Boom! It was simply unstoppable. De spat out a mouthful of yellow bile and fell on Lin Ling's arm like a shrimp. Didn't you want to see my 100 years of cultivation? Now you've seen it. Lin Ling said indifferently without looking at him. His words made De's heart tremble violently. This was the result of Lin Ling's 100 years of cultivation. Was this still the eliminated Lin Ling? In fact, it was not only De. Now, everyone was in disbelief. This was because they had all sensed that Lin Ling was now a 5th grade innate godly fetus with a Luai's constitution. 5th grade. This had already surpassed 99% of the people. Among all the trial challengers, there were no more than 5 people who could match Lin Ling. His godly force must have reached 800 strands. He has successfully cultivated the Luai's true god. An old man muttered to himself solemnly. As his words floated out, it was as if a wave of panic had spread to everyone's hearts. 800 strands of the power of God was too terrifying. One had to know that Emperor 13 only had 400 strands of the power of God. Although De had only used 400 strands of the power of God, it was obvious that he had more than 400 strands of the power of God. He probably had 500 strands of the power of God. However, he was still unable to withstand a single blow. This is Lin Ling's full power. Didn't he fail to become a god? How did his godly fetus reach the 5th grade? 800 strands of the power of God in 100 years. If it isn't because the Luai's true body is too powerful, then it's because his comprehension ability is too terrifying. The top trial challengers were also discussing spiritedly. Boom. At this moment, Lin Ling grabbed De with one hand and pounced towards Emperor 13. His foot kicked out. The white lightning made him as fast as a ray of light. The sole of his foot appeared right in front of Emperor 13's face. Emperor 13's pupils constricted. In his eyes, a gigantic foot was kicking towards him. Dodge, I have to dodge. I can't let him kick me. Otherwise, I'll be so embarrassed. Emperor 13 roared in his heart. He activated all his realm essence in an attempt to dodge. However, he couldn't do anything about it. His body hadn't even moved, but a foot had already landed on his cheek. Bang! That foot caused Emperor 13's nose to become crooked. White lightning snakes attacked him, causing his body to tremble. He couldn't resist at all. The difference in strength was too great. Lin Ling fought 2 people at the same time. It was as easy as blowing off dust. People could only watch as Lin Ling beat up De and De. Boom, boom, boom. Lin Ling's fists landed on De's face continuously. De spat out all his teeth. His originally handsome face was now distorted. Another tooth? This scene was undoubtedly a dream to many people. Up until now, all those who had fought with Lin Ling had had their teeth broken. Could it be that Lin Ling was born to like destroying other people's faces? How long are the 2 of you going to hide your strength? At this moment, Lin Ling suddenly spoke. Hide our strength? When De and Emperor 13 heard Lin Ling's words, they were so angry that they wanted to vomit blood. This was because they didn't hide their strength at all. They had already used all their strength. A warrior can be killed, but not humiliated. De roared. His eyes were red. Back in the realm of the gods, he had fought to a draw with Lin Ling. Now, he was being beaten up by Lin Ling. How could he take this lying down? Therefore he activated all his realm essence. Lin Ling, I'll fight you to the death. After all his strength erupted, De was like a deity. His aura was monstrous. Bang! However, just as this aura erupted, a figure appeared in front of De. At the same time, a palm was placed on his chest. A ferocious divine power erupted. After a boom, De was immediately sent flying. The aura that had just erupted also instantly withered. Still, he couldn't withstand a single blow. De, you should use all your strength. When De was sent flying, Lin Ling's voice floated over at the same time. Damn it, I've already used all my strength. De was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. He couldn't help but curse. Chapter 42:56. Bam. However, just as he retreated, a knee shot over and hit his cheek, once again turning his face into a vat of dye. I say, you're really a stray dog. Lin Ling said coldly after sending Emperor 13 flying. This was what Emperor 13 had said to Saint Guyi. Now, Lin Ling was returning the favor. So Lin Ling is doing this for Saint Guyi. Many people came to a sudden realization and secretly rejoiced for Saint Guyi. It was Saint Guyi's fortune to have met Lin Ling. In the end, Emperor Yi and Emperor 13 were beaten up like dogs. Lin Ling held them up with one hand and looked at the four gods coldly. The four gods were silent. Lei Gong stared at Lin Ling and felt touched. Although he knew that Lin Ling was doing this for Saint Guyi, he also knew that without Saint Guyi, Lin Ling would not have used his full strength. Emperor Yi and Emperor 13 have lost. They are disqualified. The third and fourth person from the eastern region will take their place. I wonder if this is the rule? Lin Ling said calmly. He had challenged Emperor Yi and Emperor Yi not only to avenge Saint Guyi, but also to help Saint Guyi regain his spot. Hearing this, everyone fell silent. According to the rules, this was indeed the case. Lin Ling, you're doing this on purpose, aren't you? Hiding your strength and then eliminating others? Haha, isn't this too vicious? You're also affecting the relationship between the four gods. Suddenly, a cold voice rang out. This voice was a bit hoarse, and when it landed in people's ears, it caused them to feel a bit of pain. Hee, stop trying to drive a wedge between us. Hearing this, Lin Ling's gaze swept over the crowd. Others did not know who had spoken, but he had locked onto the person who had spoken. He said indifferently, I dare to challenge you, so I am not afraid of others' challenges. Those who are not convinced can come and challenge me. I will beat you until you are convinced. His voice was arrogant. Then he looked at the crowd. This sentence stunned many people. No one had expected Lin Ling to be so arrogant. He dared to challenge anyone. This was only the second battle for the spot. Compared to the first battle, it was much weaker. There were many real experts here. Are you sure about what you said? Suddenly, an old man from Yoshin's side stepped forward. That man was a divine general and a highly respected figure in Yoshin's side. Naturally, his strength was incomparably powerful. He looked at Lin Ling indifferently and said. He didn't have much hatred for Lin Ling, but Lin Ling was too arrogant and had taught countless people a lesson. Therefore, he found Lin Ling an eyesore. I am. Lin Ling nodded. Hearing this, the old man looked at Lei Gong. Lei Gong was still expressionless. He did not stop him, nor did he agree. However, the old man knew that Lei Gong had chosen to ignore this matter. All right, then I will teach this person a lesson on behalf of Lord Lei Gong. I will let some people know how to behave. The old man nodded. He stepped forward and shot toward Lin Ling. A shield appeared in his hand. It shone with colorful lights. It was extremely dazzling. Dong. The shield also emitted a heavy rumbling sound. This was the Black Skeleton Flood Dragon Shield. It was said that it was made by millions of black flood dragons. It was extremely rare. The old man got it by luck in the realm of the gods. Moreover, the shield was damaged. Otherwise it would be even more powerful. This is the shield used by the divine soldiers during the Battle of the Gods. Kirashin said suddenly. His thoughts went back to the past. Back then, when 100,000 divine soldiers fought against the will of the world, Ma Fongfong was holding this shield. Whoosh! Lin Ling's eyes flashed. He pointed with his right hand. Suddenly, a sharp bolt of lightning shot out. Clang! However, as soon as they descended onto the shield, they were immediately rebounded. This caused Lin Ling to be shocked. Because he'd utilized 600 strands of divine energy in that attack just now. He'd intended to test the shield, but who would have expected that it would actually be rebounded? Kid, let me teach you how to behave. As a junior, you should respect your seniors. The old man wasn't surprised by the outcome before him. Because his shield possessed formidable might, and it was capable of reflecting the might of gods. According to what he knew, before the Black Skeleton Flood Dragon Shield was damaged, it could rebound 10,000 streaks of the power of God. It was terrifying. Now, it could easily rebound 600 streaks of the power of God. Whoosh! Lin Ling's expression was still calm. However, his hands continued to shoot out bolts of lightning. They roared and surged toward the old man. Such an attack undoubtedly made many people's expressions change drastically. Their eyes were full of seriousness. Lin Ling was indeed strong. His strength was probably comparable to the 9 states' martial gods. However, the old man sneered. He held his shield in front of him. Then, There was a continuous roar around him. All the white lightning was rebounded. Even the onlookers were secretly sweating for him, because the scene in front of them was too terrifying. However, when the lightning gradually weakened, the old man was still safe and sound. He even laughed coldly. Then he pounced toward Lin Ling again. In the void, a huge ancient crocodile god appeared. It wagged its tail as if it could split the sky and earth apart. Rumble! The huge crocodile god bit in Lin Ling's direction. Whoosh! Lin Ling was still expressionless. The 8 wings on his back flapped at the same time. He used the speed of 80,000 worlds and disappeared from where he was. The moment he disappeared, the crocodile god bit down. The void was instantly torn apart. The distant land of infinity was torn apart like paper. It was so exaggerated that it directly turned into dust. If this attack was used in the 10,000 worlds, countless realms would suffer. You're really fast at escaping. The old man floated in front of the crocodile god and sneered. However, just as he finished speaking, a figure shot toward him. The white lightning was blinding and shocking. It was Lin Ling. What is Lin Ling doing? Could it be that he doesn't believe it and wants to fight with his life on the line? It's useless. Seeing Lin Ling's actions, many people were stunned. Some people who had a grudge against Lin Ling sneered. In their opinion, Lin Ling must have broken a broken jar. After all, who asked him to boast before? Now that he was about to lose, naturally he would fight with his life on the line. However, Lin Ling's strength was 800 streaks of divine power. That shield could reflect divine power. Come, I'll let you know how inexperienced you are. Seeing Lin Ling fight with his life on the line, the old man also put his shield in front of him. He sneered. After all, he was a rising star. He was too impulsive. One had to know that his crocodile god's attack was a 4th-grade divine fetus. Although he was confident that he could hurt Lin Ling was too fast. The attack could not catch up. Lin Ling's divine power could also hurt him. However, he had the shield and was not afraid of Lin Ling's attack. Now that Lin Ling was fighting with his life on the line, wasn't that what he wanted? Chapter 42:57. It's going to hit him. At this moment, someone finally let out a shout. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, there was a roar. Everyone saw a fist land on the old man's shield. This made many people's eyes widen. Lin Ling was crazy. He knew that the black skeleton dragon shield could reflect the power of the gods, but he didn't avoid it. Instead, he took it head-on. Wasn't this giving the old man a chance? Was this his chance? Crack, crack, crack. However, as soon as everyone had this thought, a crisp sound rang out. Then, under countless shocked gazes, cracks appeared on the black skeleton dragon shield, and they continued to spread. What? The old man lowered his head and looked at the shield. He was so frightened that his hair stood on end. In his eyes, the cracks on the black skeleton flood dragon shield became more and more severe. Then, from the center of the cracks, a fist suddenly broke through the shield and rushed over, landing heavily on his chest. Bang! With one punch, the old man spat out blood and fell back. He could clearly feel that Lin Ling's punch was so terrifying that it had seriously injured him. Boom! As soon as he fell back, the black skeleton dragon shield completely exploded. Millions of black skeleton dragon souls swam out and disappeared in all directions. The shield also exploded. Staring at this terrifying scene, the people couldn't help but scream. What the hell is going on? Could it be that the black skeleton dragon shield had reached its limit and shattered? For a moment, many people were puzzled. Only the 4 gods narrowed their eyes. Obviously, they knew what Lin Ling had used to destroy the shield. Almost at the same time, the crocodile god behind the old man bit down viciously. Its huge bite seemed like it could tear the world apart. However, at this moment, Lin Ling clearly showed everyone what he was relying on. Lin Ling soared into the sky, and there was no longer any lightning around him. Instead, he had transformed into a divine general with dragon claws, dragon tail, and black dragon armor. Behind him, there were even tens of thousands of tentacles dancing wildly, fusing together with his hair. He was majestic. He raised his hands above his head and soared higher into the sky to resist the huge crocodile god. Boom, boom, boom. In the eyes of countless people, the crocodile god's huge mouth finally closed. The moment it closed, the void in front of it was immediately torn apart. Ka ka ka. However, just as the crocodile god closed its mouth, it suddenly felt like something was wrong. It was as if someone was forcing its mouth open, and it was opening wider and wider. What? Void was shocked. In everyone's eyes, a figure appeared in the giant mouth. He was using both hands to stare at the crocodile deity's mouth, and he kept pushing it towards the sky. One had to know that the crocodile god was a fourth-grade talent. With such a bite, 90% of the four gods could not withstand it. But Lin Ling was going head-to-head with the crocodile god. That was insane. Plop. The seventh prince, Wangu Yanhui, and the others fell to their knees in midair. Their faces were as white as a sheet of paper, whereas Sister Zhen's eyes were trembling. Based on this move alone, she knew that Lin Ling was not much weaker than her. In fact, Lin Ling was slightly stronger than her. Why? These people who had enmity with Lin Ling were all very indignant. Why was Lin Ling, who had disappeared for 100 years, so powerful? Where did he go? Of course, not only them, but even those who had always doubted Lin Ling swallowed their saliva. They finally knew that Lin Ling had regained his former glory. No, he was even stronger than before. Boom, boom, boom. While everyone was thinking about this, the crocodile god's huge mouth was finally forcefully torn open. Then, blood spurted out as Lin Ling forcefully tore it in half. Violence. What kind of violence was this? Swoosh. The huge crocodile god, dripping with blood, fell from the sky. It was a shocking scene. What a terrifying power. This is not the power of a god, but the power of his realm essence and physical body. Someone finally realized this and said in a serious voice. It should be around 300,000 realms of energy. However, the most terrifying thing is his realm essence. He is only a level 9 martial god, but the density of his realm essence is comparable to that of a god. Someone else said. The person who spoke was very powerful. He was the second strongest person in the Titanic Crescent God Trial Taker. His eyes were burning as if his blood had been stimulated to fight. Whoosh. At this time, Lin Ling had already shot towards the old man with his gorgeous tentacles like an ancient war god. The old man was floating in the void. His eyes were trembling because he saw a monster shooting towards him. He was so scared that his soul almost left his body. This was because he had seen Lin Ling's tyrannical attack with his own eyes. I admit defeat. He frantically retreated and shouted. Admit your sister. However, Lin Ling's fist landed on the old man's chest and broke his sternum. Bang bang bang. Next, Lin Ling violently attacked and beat up the old man, breaking his teeth. I'll teach you how to behave. Lin Ling's arrogant voice resounded in the void. Previously, the senior wanted to teach Lin Ling how to behave, but now, Lin Ling was teaching him how to behave. Broken teeth again. Looking at the old man who was beaten like a dog, many people's hearts trembled. Their previous dissatisfaction with Lin Ling had quietly disappeared. The main thing was that Lin Ling was too cruel. He directly broke someone's teeth without saying a word. Moreover, he was so strong. Let him go. What's the point of bullying the old man? You challenged 2 people at once before, so you should also accept the challenge from 2 people. Old man Yi Xian has been defeated. Next, I will fight you. At this time, someone interrupted Lin Ling and appeared in front of Lin Ling in a flash. This person was 2 meters tall and wore heavy armor. With his hands behind his back, he tilted his head and looked at Lin Ling with a strong desire to fight. The trial taker of the Titanic Crescent God, the Imperial Crown Prince, and also the second-rank trial taker under Lord Titanic Crescent. I think I'm qualified to fight you. The man called the Imperial Crown Prince said indifferently. As soon as he finished speaking, a terrible shockwave gushed out from his body and blew Lin Ling back a few meters. This was an expert with half a step into the ranks of gods and a 5th-grade talent. Pah! He reached out with one hand, and the ferocious divine power turned into a red ball of blood in his palm. Then he threw it out. After his blood ball exploded in the distance, a wave of power even stronger than Lin Ling's burst of power exploded out in all directions. Rumble! Those who were weaker all lost their balance and tumbled in the air like rice straws. With such strength, can I fight you? The Imperial Crown Prince ignored the changes around him and still looked at Lin Ling with a smile. His previous move was obviously to prove his strength and that he was qualified to fight Lin Ling, the second-ranked trial taker. If Lin Ling could still win, It meant that Lin Ling was definitely the second-ranked trial taker under Lei Gong. Chapter 4258. If Lin Ling could still win, this meant that under Lei Gong's command, Lin Ling would definitely be the second strongest of the trial takers. This also made people feel like they were dreaming. Lin Ling, who had disappeared for 100 years, had returned. Could it be that he was going to become the second strongest of the trial takers? This was too exaggerated. With your strength, you barely qualify. Sigh. At this moment, Lin Ling also spoke indifferently. He threw the dog-like old man aside and looked at Crown Prince with his hands behind his back. Barely qualify? When people heard this, they almost spat out a mouthful of blood. The second strongest of the trial takers was barely qualified? They didn't know if Lin Ling was too arrogant or if Lin Ling was too confident. All right, then let me see how barely qualified you are. Come, defeat me and you will become the second strongest of the trial takers. Sigh. The man called Crown Prince wasn't angry. Instead, his battle intent boiled even more. This was because this was the first time he had heard of Lin Ling's name. However, he had never expected Lin Ling to be so powerful that he had swept through the competition. Therefore, he wanted to see just how powerful this expert who had appeared out of nowhere was. The two stood quietly. Crown Prince didn't activate his godly embryo. Instead, he used all of his realm essence and godly power, forming a terrifying force field around him. The void was like a wave that moved up and down. Lin Ling, on the other hand, used the first stage of his innate talent fusion. Dual Dragon Innate Talent, Realm Swallowing Beast, and Devil Jellyfish. This allowed his strength to reach 400,000 realm essence and 600 strands of godly power. The first stage of his innate talent fusion didn't have as much godly power as Lei's true body. His speed also wasn't as fast, but his defensive power had greatly increased. In terms of overall attack power, it surpassed Lei's true body's 800 strands of godly power. After all, the power of 400,000 realms in addition to the realm essence of the 7 great Danshians was no small matter. Therefore, when Lin Ling stood in the void, he did not cause the void to shake like glass. Instead, he caused the void to become inexplicably heavy. If someone were to stand near him, they would immediately feel immense pressure, as if they were in the realm of the gods. Begin! The Crown Prince raised his eyes. He didn't underestimate Lin Ling. Bloody paths began to appear on the surface of his heavy armor and gathered on his right arm. Suddenly, his right arm swelled up like a giant's arm. Moreover, it was a blood-red giant's arm. Boom! With a blinding divine light, the Crown Prince vanished from where he stood. And above Lin Ling's head, a massive fist came smashing down like a meteor. No one expected the Crown Prince to be so fast with such a massive arm in hand. It was because this type of speed already reached the speed of 800 realms. However, Lin Ling's expression didn't change. His powerful soul force had already sensed the change in the sky. He secretly exclaimed, this Crown Prince's speed was truly formidable. Countless tentacles wriggled behind him and wrapped around a sword. Then, he looked at the huge fist in the sky and fiercely slashed out. Rumble! As the sword and fist collided, the sword that was originally as large as a door was slightly bent. At the same time, a ferocious force flowed through the sword and into Lin Ling's body. Ka-ka-ka! Lin Ling's bones and meridians also emitted a rumbling sound. The Crown Prince's strength was too strong. If it wasn't for his terrifying defense, this punch would have killed him. And now, although Lin Ling was fine, the giant's arm in the sky was still smashing down. The tyrant's song sword seemed unable to block it. What? Lin Ling used the tentacles behind him to hold the sword and block the Crown Prince's attack. What a ferocious force. The Crown Prince's punch has probably reached the power of 1,000 strands of divinity. Lin Ling can't block it. Everyone shrank into the distance and stared at the scene. They didn't expect that the previously insufferably arrogant Lin Ling would be suppressed. This showed the difference between Lin Ling and the Crown Prince. Rumble! The giant's fists in the sky continued to descend, forcing Lin Ling to continuously descend. However, at the critical moment, the tyrant's song sword gave off rays of Bodhi divine light, greatly increasing its divine power. Following this, Lin Ling swept out with his sword, slightly changing the direction of the giant's fists. However, this was not the case. The old fist smashed down fiercely, but it was clearly dodged by Lin Ling. Boom! Lin Ling moved his feet and dodged the giant fist smashing down from the sky. Then, he felt a ferocious force sweeping down in front of him. Your reaction is so fast. However, Lin Ling, is this all you've got? Above Lin Ling's head, the Crown Prince's cold laughter also sounded. He seemed to be fishing for the moon in the water as he retracted his giant arm and swept it toward Lin Ling. From afar, it was as if a giant pillar was sweeping away an army of thousands. Seeing this, Lin Ling also retreated, narrowly avoiding the giant arm. However, just as he moved, the Crown Prince was also incomparably agile. He retracted his sweeping arm and grabbed at Lin Ling with his palm. This giant's arm is indeed powerful. Lin Ling was still retreating, but he was also muttering to himself. He stretched out his hands, and in his palms, balls of golden flames appeared, floating like lanterns. 8,000 great heavenly flames. Then, Lin Ling fiercely slapped out. The current human king's flames had already risen from 3,000 great heavenly flames to 8,000, and the power of divinity had also reached 300. Currently, Lin Ling had fused the first stage talent, but he hadn't fused the human king's flames. Therefore, the human king's flames could easily display the great heavenly flames. Bang! 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 The golden flames that shot out were like lanterns, and like meteors, they crashed into the giant palm with beautiful trajectories. Although the power of 300 streaks of divinity couldn't shake the giant palm at all, it could slow down its speed. The eruption of the great heavenly flames also caused the void to be filled with a golden sea of fire. In the sea of fire, there was a giant human king Dharma idol. Everyone's eyes were all attracted by the golden flames, and their hearts trembled violently. Another 5th grade divine embryo. Someone muttered to himself. Naturally, he could sense the divine power of the golden flames. Lin Ling is too strong. He actually has so many tricks up his sleeve. They knew that if the one who attacked was not the Crown Prince, with Lin Ling's 2 great 5th grade divine embryos, who among the 4 gods could be his match? However, he's still a little weak in the end. Even Kuroshin spoke up, a rare smile on his lips. In the past, Lin Ling had fished with him not long ago. At that time, Lin Ling was still very weak, but now, he could be considered to be completely strong. This kid has indeed hidden his trump card. However, he even hid it from me. He's really asking for a beating. Lei Gong scolded jokingly. He had always thought that Lin Ling's strongest ability was the Lin Ling's Thunder Lock true form, but now he realized that Lin Ling was also heaven-defying in other areas. Although he was still not a match for the Crown Prince, the speed of his growth was very gratifying. Chapter 42:59. It's Lin Ling. Everyone gasped as they stared at the figure rushing out of the flames. It turned out that the human monarch's flame was just a bait. The real power was Lin Ling's next move. Everyone could clearly see that while Lin Ling was running, his palm was hanging behind his back. In his palm, a white lightning ball was blooming with a dazzling light. This was obviously the lightning of the lightning pool physique. Look, his other hand. Suddenly, someone with sharp eyes stared at Lin Ling's other palm. There, a golden flame was burning. It was the human monarch's flame. Flame and lightning in both hands. So this was Lin Ling's killer move. At this moment, the Crown Prince was attracted by the flame on his arm. Now that he had completely reacted, his eyes narrowed. However, by the time he noticed, Lin Ling had already reached his shoulder. This made him laugh coldly and spit out. Decaying world blood flame. From his mouth, red flames also spewed out, drowning Lin Ling. These flames were called flames, but they also seemed to be blood, containing supreme power. However, in the face of these flames, Lin Ling knew that his killer move could not be broken, so he did not activate the power in his hands. Instead, with a thought, countless tentacles spread out from behind him, wrapping around the tyrannical song sword and blocking in front of him. Bang bang bang. Whoosh. When the blood-red flames arrived and collided with the tyrannical song sword, an ear-piercing sound immediately erupted. However, Lin Ling, who was behind the tyrannical song sword, was safe for the time being. Instead, he jumped up. The qualifications I'm talking about are these. At this moment, he fell from the sky like a meteor. With both hands in front of him, a flame and lightning mixed with terrifying power fiercely slammed down. Is Lin Ling going to win? Everyone held their breaths. They did not expect that Lin Ling, who looked weaker, would have such terrifying battle experience. It was as if he had the ability to control everything. This kind of qualification is still a bit weak. However, the crown prince raised his head. Suddenly, a large amount of blood-red light appeared on his body. Countless bloody paths swam along his armor, forming a dazzling red armor on his head. The moment this armor appeared, the void was also illuminated. From afar, it looked like a red lamp. And just as this helmet appeared, the two domineering powers of flame and lightning slammed down. Boom! A ring of terrifying power fused with flame and lightning spewed out in all directions, and a fist of golden-white ripples also spread out. Whoosh! When it reached the experts in the distance, even though they were far away, they were still blown back continuously. It was as if they were in the middle of a wave, swaying up and down. This power was indeed terrifying. However, no one paid any attention to the swaying bodies. Their eyes were still fixed on the distance. They saw that Lin Ling was floating above the crown prince's head, maintaining the posture of slamming down with his palms. However, the crown prince was like a blood-red giant. The blood-red light in his armor did not diminish, but instead became denser. He actually blocked Lin Ling's flame and lightning power. The crown prince is indeed worthy of being the second god of the trial. With this kind of strength, it's not an exaggeration to call him a true god. Someone licked their lips and said solemnly, Lin Ling, with this kind of qualification, it's more like an itch. At this moment, the crown prince looked forward and said indifferently. Looking at his appearance, not only was he not afraid of Lin Ling's attack, he did not even look at Lin Ling. He was full of domineering. Of course, he was also very surprised because he noticed that Lin Ling's flame and lightning attack had almost reached 1,000 rays of divine power. It was very terrifying. It could be said that if it were not for him, the others would have been smashed to death. Is that so? However, Lin Ling, who was in the sky, also nodded. While the flame and lightning power was still wreaking havoc on the helmet, he suddenly raised his hands high. In his palms, the divine light of Bodhi bloomed. Then, like a drum, he continuously slammed down. Red Bodhi scripture Heavenly Sovereign Shu. 6 paths of 10,000 winds and clouds. A heroic voice also floated out from his mouth. Yellow Bodhi 1,000-hand Guanyin. Guanyin's 1,000 hands shake the universe. Blue Bodhi Sin Sea Dragon King. Divine dragon claws slay demons. With every slap, the power of Buddha exploded, and the people also heard the sound of a Buddha bell. As he continued to strike, Lin Ling raised both his palms high and delivered the final strike. Black Bodhi Wrath King. Thunder Wrath shatters the void. Boom! Suddenly, a terrifying Vajra with angry eyes appeared behind him. This Vajra was hundreds of feet tall, and its whole body was emitting a green light. Its muscles were solid, and it slammed down with its palm as if it was destroying demons. What a strong power of Buddha! This power seems to be an innate godly fetus. Lin Ling, where did all these talents come from? Their gazes were fixed on the angry Vajra, and they felt like they were about to suffocate. The crown prince's pupils constricted as he felt a domineering and ferocious force coming down on him from above. Bas! When the Vajra's giant palm slammed down, the crown prince's head shook. He no longer looked as mighty and domineering as before. He was directly smashed down like a meteor and disappeared from everyone's sight in an instant, as if he had gone straight to hell. It's broken. Seeing this, someone trembled and exclaimed. Lin Ling's means were endless. How many godly fetus talents did he hide? 7 great dantians. Luli Empress, who had been watching the battle, was also shocked. Although Lin Ling did not show his 7th dantian, she had already guessed that Lin Ling had definitely formed it. Damn it! Luli Empress could not help but curse inwardly. She had always been eyeing the Chaos Divine formula covetously, but now she did not expect that Lin Ling had actually opened his 7th dantian. When all 7 dantians opened at the same time, it would be even more terrifying than a godly fetus. If all 7 dantians' godly fetus matured, it would be a catastrophe. I have to find a way to get the Chaos Divine formula. Luli Empress knew that Lin Ling was no longer the same as before. He already had the ability to completely compete with her, and she had obviously lost the ability to control Lin Ling. If she did not get the Chaos Divine formula, she would be surpassed by Lin Ling, and she would never be able to catch up to Lin Ling. The entire void was shocked by Lin Ling's stunning palm, and no one spoke for a long time. Among Lei Gong's trial takers, except for the young Qilin, everyone had ugly expressions. Although they did not want to admit it, they all knew that Lin Ling was now above their heads. Chapter 4260. Originally, Lei Gong thought that the Luai's true body was Lin Ling's final trump card, Lin Ling's strongest move in the future. But now, it seems like it wasn't enough to be proud of. No wonder Lin Ling didn't focus on the Luai's true body in his previous cultivation. Rumble. However, just when everyone thought that the Crown Prince had lost the ability to fight, a sudden tremor came from the void below. A blinding blood-red light shot up into the sky, emitting a pressure that could crush one's soul. Within the red light, a figure slowly floated up. It didn't look fast, but in the blink of an eye, it appeared in front of everyone. Of course, this was the Crown Prince. However, he was no longer the same as before. His armor had turned completely red, and he had a pair of red wings on his back. These wings were extremely different. They were more like bat wings, and when they flapped gently, surging divine power spread out. This surge of divine energy gave off the feeling that it exceeded 1,000 strands. Could it be 1,200 strands of divine energy? No. No, I'm afraid it's 1,500 strands. Yes. A few divine generals who had been cultivating for a few years cried out in alarm. As for the trial takers of the four great gods, they shifted their horrified gazes from Lin Ling to the Crown Prince. 1,500 strands of divine energy. This was more than twice the amount of DE and the others. Although they already knew that the Crown Prince was very strong, they didn't know how strong he was until he revealed his true strength. As for the Crown Prince, he was already an extremely powerful existence before the 9 prefectures were sealed as gods. After the 9 prefectures were sealed as gods, his strength increased by leaps and bounds. It was said that in the divine realm, he even regained the memories of his previous life, and these were the memories of a mid-god. With such talent and origin, no one dared to disagree with him being ranked second among the Titanic Crescent gods. What a powerful divine fetus! He must have reached the 6th grade. Yes. Lin Ling looked at the Crown Prince in shock. He didn't expect this person to be so strong. Not bad. Yes. The Crown Prince nodded and grinned. That Vajra palm was indeed very ferocious. It made me dizzy. It's just dizziness and disorientation, that's all. If you, Crown Prince, had used your divine embryo earlier, that kind of power wouldn't have been able to harm you at all. Lin Ling also smiled. After the battle, he had a good impression of this Crown Prince. Because although this person was incomparably overbearing, he was not arrogant. From start to finish, he had regarded Lin Ling with great importance. At first, I thought you didn't have the qualifications to make me use the divine embryo. The Crown Prince shrugged. Then his eyes flickered. His body suddenly grew bigger and bigger, turning into a blood-colored giant with wings on his back. This giant was clad in thick and heavy armor. His arms and legs had turned into claws that emitted a merciless cold light. The wings on his back were even more exaggerated. They were incomparably large, and when they gently flapped, a terrifying astral wind mixed with the power of divinity spread out, causing a vortex to appear in the void. Those experts who were already very far away were blown by the astral wind, and had no choice but to retreat again. Lin Ling's body was also unstable, and he continued to retreat. He stared at the monster-like giant, and for some reason, a memory rose in his mind. A bat. That giant looked like a bat giant. Except for the head and the armor on his body, everything else was like a bat. The Immortal Blood God Clan. I didn't expect that the Immortal Blood God Clan that disappeared in the era of gods still had descendants. Yes. Thinking of this, Lin Ling said lightly. Ah. Yes. Hearing this, the Crown Prince was a little surprised. I didn't expect you to know my origin. However, I am not a descendant. I am the god of the Immortal Blood God Clan. I have reincarnated for thousands of years, and now I have returned. Yes. At present, he was no longer the Crown Prince, but an expert in the era of gods. In terms of origin, he was actually not much weaker than the 4 great gods. This also meant that Lin Ling was fighting against the gods of the era of gods, and not a contemporary expert. The 4 great gods obviously already knew about this, so they reacted calmly. Instead, they stared at Lin Ling. Now that the Crown Prince had returned to the deity position, what about Lin Ling? Did he have a deity position? If he did not, he would obviously lose. The Immortal Blood God Clan lives on the blood of heaven and earth. They are immortal and can be traced back to the ancient times. It is said that a bat heard the great Tao and transformed into a void spirit. Yes, Lin Ling said lightly. For some reason, the memory that rose in his mind seemed to be that the immortal blood god clan was very difficult to deal with. This was because they were generally immortal and could escape into the great Tao and disappear without a trace. The immortal blood god clan lives on blood. They drink the blood of mortals, and even the blood of gods. He wondered if this crown prince had drunk the blood of gods in his previous life. It seems like you are very familiar with the immortal blood god clan. Could it be that you, Lin Ling, are also a reincarnated god? Show yourself, my crown prince is very curious. After all, you are so strong, so your previous life was definitely not as simple as a lower god. You must be a mid-god. At this moment the crown prince said lightly. His words were also what everyone wanted to know the most. After all, Lin Ling had been fighting until now, and the more he fought, the stronger he became. His background was definitely not simple. Even Lei Gong's eyes were burning with curiosity. Before the 9 prefectures investiture of the gods, he had already guessed that Lin Ling's background was not simple. However, Lin Ling had failed in the investiture of the gods, and that had killed his thoughts. But now, those thoughts had floated out again. At this moment, the entire void was staring at Lin Ling, waiting for Lin Ling's answer. In fact, Wangu Yanhui and the others were secretly praying that Lin Ling's previous life was a lower god realm, and not a mid-god realm. Sorry, my previous life was not a lower god. At this moment, Lin Ling finally spoke. You really were a mid-god. Hearing this, the crown prince's eyes revealed a trace of fighting spirit. Not a mid-god either. However, Lin Ling spoke again. Boom. As soon as this sentence fell, everyone's heart exploded. Not a lower god, not a mid-god. Could it be that Lin Ling was a mid-god in his previous life? At this moment, many people swallowed their saliva. It was too frightening. After all, no one had awakened a mid-god in their previous life, and Lin Ling was clearly the first. Of course, although this was unbelievable, the strength Lin Ling displayed made people feel that it was all true. Mid-god. Chapter 4261. High-level deity, high-level deity. You have the qualifications to fight against me. Now let's see who has awakened more memories. Sigh. The crown prince loosened and clenched his claws, and the battle intent on his body boiled even more. You seem to be thinking too much. I'm not a high-level deity either. Sigh. However, just as he was about to fight fiercely, Lin Ling spoke again. Not a high-level deity? What do you mean? Sigh. The crown prince was stunned. Could it be that Lin Ling was an existence that surpassed a superior god? And what was an existence that surpassed the high-level deity? In fact, in my previous life, I wasn't a deity. Sigh. Lin Ling spoke again. Ah. Sigh. Hearing this, the crown prince opened his mouth wide. Lei Gong also opened his mouth wide. Those who were looking forward to it also opened their mouths wide. Lin Ling wasn't a deity, but he was so strong that he could even beat De like a dog. This was a joke. However, when people stared at Lin Ling again, they realized that Lin Ling wasn't joking. Moreover, there was no divine light on his body from beginning to end. He really isn't a reincarnation of a deity? Sigh. Finally, someone spoke with difficulty. It seems so. Sigh. He's not a reincarnation of a deity, but his strength is heaven-defying. This Lin Ling is really a variable. Sigh. However, if he meets the crown prince, he can't win at all if he's not a reincarnation of a high-level deity. Sigh. Next, a flurry of discussion also floated out. Some were regretful, some were gloating, and some were quietly relieved. Sigh. Sigh. Lei Gong let out a long sigh. He also knew that Lin Ling wouldn't lie at such a time, so this meant that Lin Ling really wasn't a reincarnation of a deity. This also meant that when Lin Ling grew to the limit, he would still be weaker than the 4 great deities. Lin Ling, I'm sorry, but if you're not a high-level deity, then you're not a match for me. The crown prince also shook his head regretfully and was a little angry. This was because he had hoped that Lin Ling was a medium god. This way, this battle would be more intense. However, Lin Ling had disappointed him. Forget it. Forcing me to use the god embryo is your limit. Next, I'll personally defeat you. After that, the Crown Prince didn't plan to delay any longer. His body moved, and although he looked like a giant, he possessed unimaginable speed. A pair of claws mixed with ferocious divine power clawed at Lin Ling. From afar, the Crown Prince looked like he was grabbing an ant. Rumble! His attack was also earth-shattering. It was the most powerful attack he had ever used in the competition. It was as if the entire void was about to shatter. Admit defeat. Lei Gong shook his head. He knew that the competition was finally over. He didn't want Lin Ling to get hurt, so he spoke up for Lin Ling. After he finished speaking, he looked at the other three gods and nodded at them. The other three gods were expressionless, but they nodded one after another, agreeing to the end of the competition. Boom! However, at this moment, a roar suddenly came from the front. Then, a terrifying force erupted. The Crown Prince's enormous claws were blocked by a fist. Moreover, that fist was only the size of an ordinary person's fist. At the moment of collision with the claw, an unstoppable force rushed out. Those who were weaker, even if they were far away, were so shocked that they spat out a mouthful of blood. It was as if they were witnessing the battle of the gods in the past. What happened? This time, everyone looked over. The pupils of the four gods were also trembling as they stared at the scene. In the distant void, 3 rays of light bloomed. They were gold, white, and green. These rays of light enveloped a man. The man was wearing a blue robe. He maintained the posture of punching out, but he easily blocked the attack of the giant in front of him. At this moment, the man's appearance had become clear. Everything was exactly the same as Lin Ling's. 3 divine embryos activated at the same time. Lei Gong instantly cried out in alarm. The Crown Prince's pupils also stared at the insignificant ant in front of him, feeling incredulous. This was because this Lin Ling had erupted with another trump card and blocked his powerful attack. One must know that his attack could even force a god to retreat. Who said that only a superior god can't fight you? At this moment, Lin Ling's hair was wildly dancing. The dual dragon god talent had disappeared. He had already used the second stage of the talent fusion. The second stage increased Lin Ling's power by 500,000 worlds and 1,500 strands of divinity. Now, his divine power was on par with the Crown Prince's, and the fusion of the 3 Tier 5 divine embryos had greatly surpassed the Crown Prince's. Coupled with his terrifying physical strength, he felt that the reincarnation of a common god was nothing more than this. How is this possible? How is this possible? This is fake. This is fake. The Crown Prince's gaze was still fixed on Lin Ling, but he kept shaking his head. He didn't believe that a non-god reincarnation could fight him. Actually, they didn't believe it as well. After all, they'd survived the era of the gods, and they knew how terrifying the gods were all those years ago. It was utterly impossible for them to catch up to the gods of all those years ago by relying on their own strength. How could there be such a variable in this world? Xiao. However, Lin Ling ignored their disbelief. He had already shot towards the Crown Prince, the power in his body surging, giving him a domineering aura that seemed to dominate the world. His fist didn't seem to be as strong as the Crown Prince's, but it fiercely punched out, directly breaking through the void and creating a huge void passage. So what if you're a superior god? Accompanying Lin Ling's fist was Lin Ling's domineering voice. He had bitterly cultivated for 4,000 years. Although he wasn't the reincarnation of a god, he was confident that he could surpass the gods of the past. Seeing Lin Ling take the initiative to attack, the Crown Prince was shocked, because he felt that after Lin Ling used his final trump card, he seemed to have become more confident, as if he was looking down on him. This also reminded him of what Lin Ling had said at the beginning. You are barely qualified to fight me. But this was a dream for the Crown Prince. He was a mid-level god reincarnated. How could he be afraid of a rising star of the current generation? Crossing Fate Underworld. Immediately, the Crown Prince also attacked, activating all his divinity. He wanted to see if Lin Ling was really that powerful. Boom! The huge palm and Lin Ling's fist collided again. A more terrifying force than before erupted, shocking everyone's eyes and causing pain in their eardrums. The void began to shatter like glass. But what was truly frightening was that the huge immortal vampire god was sent flying by Lin Ling's punch, and somersaulted in the air as if it couldn't withstand a single blow. The Crown Prince actually lost in a clash of strength? This change was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. If they didn't know that the Crown Prince didn't know Lin Ling, they would definitely think that the crown prince was going easy on Lin Ling. Chapter 4262. Lei Gong had always thought that only the reincarnation of a superior god could compete with the crown prince. However, Lin Ling used facts to tell him that even if he wasn't the reincarnation of a god, he could still defeat a medium god by himself. In fact, even the eyes of the other three gods flickered. This was because up until now, the top two experts of each god's trial takers all had powerful reincarnations, and Lin Ling was the only one who wasn't a reincarnated god. Does this guy have no limits? I thought he was already very powerful if he could defeat De. The Curishan also spoke in a low voice, his voice filled with shock. Rumble. At this moment, a pair of golden-white wings grew out of Lin Ling's back. They were majestic, with golden flames on one side and white lightning on the other. With a sweep of the wings, the shattered void was blown into a huge vortex. Lin Ling turned into a gorgeous trajectory and pounced on the crown prince. Die! The crown prince's eyes were red. The huge bat wings behind him moved, and he chose the most direct and domineering way to clash with Lin Ling. After all, although he was the reincarnation of a medium god, he had only just regained his memories. He lacked the ability to use many of his techniques. However, even the simplest method, with his divine fetus and divine power, was enough to dominate the void of the 9 prefectures. 2 figures, 2 types of wings, clashed in front of countless gazes. Lin Ling's arm had turned golden. Upon closer inspection, there was actually the shadow of a Bodhi in his palm. It emitted a green light, as if he was holding a green gem. Boom! After the collision, the crown prince immediately sensed an unfathomable power surging towards him. This power was indestructible and ancient. Even with his 1,500 strands of divine power, he still felt that it was a strenuous and unrewarding task. Upon closer inspection, a pair of fists collided in the void, creating a huge shock wave. However, what shocked everyone was that the power contained in the thin fist was not the slightest bit weaker than the fist of a giant. Whoosh! At this moment, a gust of wind swept towards Lin Ling. Upon closer inspection, it was a slender tail, like a cat's tail. However, when it swept past, its power was terrifying. Bang! Lin Ling didn't even look to his side. His left hand clenched into a fist and punched out, sending the tail flying. Following that, Lin Ling circulated all the world essence in his body. In addition, his god force also surged into his right fist. Borrowing this powerful force, he forced the crown prince to retreat continuously. Wow! This scene caused many people to cry out in surprise. No one would have thought that a tiny ant could push a giant. After all, their bodies were extremely asymmetrical. De sensed that Lin Ling's strength was getting fiercer and fiercer as the fight went on. His expression changed drastically. Finally, he realized that he couldn't fight back and immediately retreated. 1,000 calamity 10,000 destruction wave. Just as he floated back, he placed his hands in front of his mouth and suddenly spat out a purple sound wave. The sound wave continued to expand, as if it was going to envelop the entire void. As soon as the sound wave appeared, many people in the distance felt a splitting headache and groaned. Although this power has the god force, there seems to be another power within it. Moreover, it's a power that's beyond imagination. Among the 4 great gods, Curishan couldn't help but be shocked. The current martial gods and gods all controlled the god force. However, De, a reincarnated mid-level god, had actually awakened a technique that surpassed the god force. God steps. Lin Ling's eyes flashed. He instantly sensed that the purple sound wave was different. After all, he also had the god steps and had experienced many years of cultivation. Now he was extremely powerful. Naturally, he was familiar with the crown prince's techniques. He obviously didn't expect De to be so powerful in his previous life. After all, De had just returned to his godhood. Just as Lin Ling was feeling shocked, circles of purple sound waves arrived. They were like ropes that tightly bound Lin Ling. Moreover, the power of the sound wave surged into Lin Ling's body. It was so domineering that it wanted to destroy everything. However, Lin Ling was now the fusion of 3 divine embryos. Although the human king's flame and the thunder lock real body didn't provide a strong physical body, the Vajra Bodhi could turn Lin Ling into a Vajra. The strength of his physical body was even more abnormal than the first fusion. Therefore, the power of the sound wave couldn't affect Lin Ling at all. Ling. Seeing that Lin Ling was bound, De finally let out a sigh of relief. He said indifferently, Lin Ling, I admit that you're very powerful. Moreover, you're the second strongest trial tester. However, you're still not qualified to defeat me. Break for me. However, just as he finished speaking, Lin Ling's low voice came from the front. It was like the anger of a Vajra. Then, Lin Ling's body shone with a green light, causing his skin to emit a metallic luster. However, the luster was green. Then, Lin Ling's body trembled as he let out a low voice. A powerful force broke free from the purple sound waves outside his body. Then, with a boom, the sound waves that bound Lin Ling's body were all broken. This guy. Seeing this domineering scene, even the Titanic Crescent God let out a low roar. He was sure that Lin Ling's strength was in the top 10 among the 4 gods. It's broken. As for the Crown Prince, his eyes were filled with confusion. He couldn't believe what was happening before him. However, just at this moment, a gust of wind blew at his face. Upon closer inspection, it was a fist. Most importantly, this fist was very fast. In the blink of an eye, it was in front of his eyes. It contained a domineering killing intent. I admit defeat. At this critical moment, the Crown Prince helplessly shouted. Crash! The fist finally stopped in front of his face. That ferocious wind caused his long hair to flutter. The Crown Prince smiled wryly. He had never thought that he would lose. He couldn't help but remember what Lin Ling had said before. He, the Crown Prince, was barely qualified to fight against him, but now it seemed that, after all, from the start of the battle until now, the Crown Prince had been suppressed and didn't have the upper hand at all. The Crown Prince's loss meant that Lin Ling's strength was now in the top 8 among the 40 challengers. A single stone caused 1,000 ripples. After witnessing this fierce battle, the crowd completely approved of Lin Ling in their hearts. The 4 gods were silent. Only Lei Gong smiled faintly. He knew that Lin Ling's name had spread far and wide among them. No one dared to underestimate him. Lin Ling, you win. At this time, the Titanic Crescent God smiled, but his eyes had a trace of seriousness. This was because from the start, he didn't know who Lin Ling was and couldn't remember this rising star. But now, he completely remembered this name. His words also meant that he recognized Lin Ling's qualifications. The battle for the spots was finally over. Chapter 4263. Still want to fight? The 4 gods were stunned. Lin Ling still wanted to fight? He had already defeated several powerful experts. Why would he still want to fight? Could it be that he had not used his full strength before? Who do you want to fight? Juk God suddenly asked. I heard that the #1 challenger under Eugene, Luli Empress, is not only beautiful, but also very powerful. So, I want to spar with her. Lin Ling continued with a smile. Luli Empress. Many people looked at Luli Empress. Some of them knew about the grudge between the Empress and Lin Ling. However, they did not expect that Lin Ling would take the initiative to challenge Luli Empress. If they remembered correctly, Lin Ling had been avoiding Luli Empress in the past. Luli Empress's eyes flashed. She was filled with fighting spirit and killing intent. She wanted to fight too. Although Lin Ling was very strong now, she was confident that she could defeat Lin Ling. However, that might not be the case in the future. Today is a battle for the slot. Let's stop before going too far. It won't be good for anyone if we go too far. Let's leave it at that. All right. At this time, a cold voice sounded. It was Eugene who had been silent all this time. She had obviously stopped the battle between Lin Ling and Luli Empress. This disappointed Lin Ling and Luli Empress because they felt that this was the best time to settle their grudge. However, since Eugene had spoken, no one could go against her unless they were stronger than Eugene. Lin Ling nodded and sighed inwardly. He knew that he had missed the opportunity. However, he wasn't in a hurry. After all, he had already surpassed the Glaze Empress. All he lacked was an opportunity to have a great battle. As for him, Lin Ling, as long as he had surpassed someone before, no one would be able to surpass him. Lin Ling had always been confident. Eugene, what are you thinking? Luli Empress was not satisfied. She was not as good as Lin Ling. She was afraid that Lin Ling would surpass her sooner or later. However, this time, the person who spoke was her superior, so she chose to acquiesce. Since the 10 slots have been decided, Let's end the battle. All right. At this time, Lei Gong said. Hearing Lei Gong's words, the Kuroshin nodded and pondered for a while. Suddenly he said, although the spirit nation has disappeared, I think they are still watching us. I think we should unify all the experts and use their strength to become gods. For example, the strongest 100 holy knights, the strongest 10 experts, and the strongest 10 experts. What do you think of the 10 great generals and the 8 most powerful new gods of this generation? Hearing this, many people's eyes lit up. After the investiture of the gods in the 9 continents, the void in the 9 continents was in chaos. The old experts were surpassed and the new experts rose to prominence. It was hard to tell who was stronger and who was weaker. However, if the experts were divided into ranks, then it would be clear. This was the current investiture of the gods. I agree. Juk God nodded. I agree too. Eugene did the same. Since everyone has agreed, then I have no objections. In the end, the Thunder God nodded as well. Next, the 4 gods began to discuss the identities of the 100 great paladins, the 10 great generals, and the 8 new gods. These people obviously had higher statuses, especially the 8 new gods. In fact, they were already the strongest people below the gods. And these 8 new gods were the strongest 8 out of the 40 trial challengers. They were experts like Luli Empress and Young Lin. Among them, Lin Ling was also one of the 8 new gods. Moreover, his ranking was not low among the 8. At least, he was stronger than the Crown Prince. The 8 new gods of the current era. When the people heard the names, they were inexplicably excited. They believed that in the future, these 8 new gods would definitely take over the position of the 4 gods and compete with the spirit nation. The 8 new gods of the current era, not bad names. Amongst the 8 strongest challengers, the corners of one of their mouths curled up to reveal a proud smile. This was because having such a title was a supreme honor. Thousands of years later, people in the 9 continents would remember them. This was also something that would go down in history forever. Therefore, the 8 of them were more or less excited. Of course, if there had to be an exception, it would be Lin Ling. This was because Lin Ling had met the pure Yang spiritual master. Therefore, he knew that these so-called 8 new gods were only titles given by themselves. They were not gods at all. Next, the crowd began to leave one after another. Lin Ling walked back to Lei Gong and followed the crowd. However, other than Young Lin, the others looked at Lin Ling with a complicated gaze. Lin Ling, congratulations. A moment later, someone finally reacted and smiled. He cupped his fists and bowed to Lin Ling as if he was trying to curry favor. This was because the current Lin Ling could represent half of the Lei Gong Hall. He was only second to Young Lin. I was just lucky. Lin Ling replied lazily to these polite words, as if he did not care at all. Ha ha. Seeing Lin Ling's indifferent attitude, the person could only smile awkwardly. However, he did not dare to get angry because Lin Ling was so strong. Looking at the divine generals and the others in Lei Gong Hall, their eyes were also filled with complicated emotions. This was because not long ago, when Lin Ling came to Lei Gong Hall, they all thought that Lord Lei Gong was lenient and allowed Lin Ling to return. However, who knew that they were overthinking things? Lin Ling was still ridiculously strong and even more ferocious than before. With complicated emotions, they walked towards Lin Ling and greeted Lin Ling. Lin Ling was much more polite to these divine generals and returned their greetings. Behind the crowd, only Sister Zhen did not greet Lin Ling. Now, her face was filled with malevolence and her heart was filled with dissatisfaction. How did Lin Ling become so strong? How did Lin Ling surpass her after 100 years of bitter cultivation? She had a feeling that now that Lin Ling's status and strength had soared, he would definitely make a move on her in the future. Either you die or I live. Lin Ling. Oh Lin Ling, you're so ruthless. You forced me to do this. Sister Zhen's eyes quietly flashed with murderous intent. One must know that when Lin Ling first came to Lei Gong Hall, she had a grudge with Lin Ling, which led to her wanting to teach Lin Ling a lesson. With Lin Ling's rise, her lesson had turned into a thick murderous intent. Lin Ling was unaware of all this. In fact, he had no time to pay attention to Sister Zhen. After all, to him, Sister Zhen was nothing more than an ant. Lin Ling, I heard that you've become one of the 8 new gods. Congratulations. I was injured previously and did not get to see those battles. Sigh, what a pity. Chapter 42-64. AI. It's all because I'm useless. Hearing Lin Ling's words, Shangyi's eyes flashed with disappointment. But what's the point of obtaining a slot? I'm already a cripple. Even if I have a slot to enter the Eight Gods' heavenly palace, it's nothing more than a joke. At the very least, you're still alive. Perhaps you can break and rebuild. Perhaps, the Eight Gods' heavenly palace will be your place of rebirth. Lin Ling retracted his smile and said indifferently. His words caused Shangyi's body to tremble. He looked at Lin Ling in disbelief, but he soon realized that Lin Ling wasn't joking. Break and rebuild. After that, he kept thinking about Lin Ling's words, and a hint of fighting spirit appeared in his originally dispirited eyes. That's right. Even though he was crippled, he wasn't dead yet. There was still hope. Lin Ling, thank you. Thinking of this, Shangyi thanked Lin Ling gratefully. Thank you, Lord Lei Gong. Lin Ling smiled and walked side by side with Shangyi. This caused the people behind them to look at him with envy. They thought that Shangyi had managed to climb onto a thick thigh. After all, Lin Ling was an existence that couldn't be underestimated. You dogs scram. Don't block the way. As they walked along the corridor, there were also people in front of them. However, Lin Ling continued to walk forward with Shangyi, not slowing down in the slightest. Wangu Yanhui, the seventh prince, and the others had unknowingly appeared in front of them. When they heard the voice behind them, they didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Their bodies trembled with anger, but they didn't dare to say anything. They could only brace themselves and move aside, allowing Lin Ling and Shangyi to walk side by side. A few pieces of trash. No matter how good your teeth are, you can't escape the fate of being beaten up by me. Lin Ling mocked as he walked past them. Teeth. Speaking of this, Wangu Yanhui and the others shuddered involuntarily. They had planned to change their teeth after leaving this place, but now, they were hesitating. Just like that, Lin Ling led Saint Yi forward. Wherever they went, both divine generals and trial takers made way for them. The current generation's 8 great new gods were clearly not people they could afford to offend. Putting aside their status as people who stood above tens of thousands of people, even their strength could easily suppress everyone. Lin Ling, I'm sorry I can't fight you. As Lin Ling and the others walked faster and faster, Luli Empress and the others finally appeared in front of them. Beside Luli Empress were 6 people. They were the strongest existences among the trial challengers, including the Crown Prince. Seeing this, Saint Guy immediately slowed down, not daring to step into the circle of the 8 new deities. I'm also very sorry. Lin Ling ignored them and continued to walk forward slowly. 7 pairs of eyes looked at Lin Ling at the same time. Other than the glazed Empress, the Crown Prince, and young Qilin, whose gazes were slightly different, everyone else's gazes were filled with battle intent. This was because they were the strongest amongst the challengers, and they also wanted to test Lin Ling's strength. Of course, other than the battle intent in their eyes, they didn't show any contempt or disdain. After all, Lin Ling had already received their acknowledgement. Next time, there will be a chance. Luli Empress looked at Lin Ling and said, I hope it won't be too long. Lin Ling nodded and didn't say anything else. He looked ahead and strode forward, quickly leaping past the 7 people. This action caused the crowd to exclaim in surprise. Because Lin Ling was one of the 8 new deities, he should be walking with the 8 new deities. However, Lin Ling had leaped past them. Was Lin Ling trying to say that he was the leader of the 8 new deities? This Lin Ling is strong, but he's also very arrogant. Yeah, he doesn't want to be on the same level as us. I hope I have a chance to fight him in the future. You will. Seeing Lin Ling walk forward proudly, the 8 new deities smiled faintly, their voices filled with coldness and battle intent. At this moment, Lin Ling had already reached the outside. He looked at the endless clouds in the distance and smiled. This time, he had finally taken back everything that had disappeared for 100 years. He had become a trial challenger again, and an 8-star one at that. Goodbye. Behind Lin Ling, the crowd walked out of the palace and said their goodbyes. Then, they separated and flew in different directions. Lin Ling, you're not bad. Unknowingly, your strength has reached such a level. The Kuroshin walked towards Lin Ling and laughed. Beside him was Tsuehua, Xiaoluan, and the others. Xiaoluan looked at Lin Ling excitedly, then ignored the Kuroshin and came to Lin Ling and bowed. Xiaoluan greets Lord Lin Ling. Xiaoluan's status on the Kirishin side was not to be underestimated. However, in front of Lin Ling, Xiaoluan was still very respectful, as if she was Lin Ling's maid. After all, if it weren't for Lin Ling, she would have died in the mine. None of this would have happened. That's Xiaoluan, right? I heard she's the will of the realm. I didn't expect her to know Lin Ling. Yes. And from the looks of it, she's very respectful to Lin Ling. Yes. The crowd was still leaving, but when they saw the scene in front of the palace, they were all jealous. Because of Xiaoluan's status, the four gods didn't dare to touch her easily. Instead, they treated her like a princess. After all, Xiaoluan was the will of the realm. In the future, the four gods might have to rely on her. Yet, she was so respectful to Lin Ling. Who wouldn't be envious? Get up. Yes. Lin Ling helped Xiaoluan up. He saw that Xiaoluan was doing well, so he was happy for her. Of course, he also quietly sensed that a powerful force was awakening in Xiaoluan's body. It was millions of times stronger than before. Then, Lin Ling pulled Xiaoluan over and asked her how she had been all these years. Next to them, the Kirishin saw Lin Ling constantly asking questions. His eyes widened because he heard Lin Ling ask Xiaoluan if the Kirishin had bullied her. Did she have enough to eat in the Kirishin? If the Kirishin had bullied Xiaoluan, Lin Ling would never let that old Kirishin go. Old man. This word was even clearer. Not only did the Kirishin hear it, but even Cui Hua and the others heard it. They were all secretly laughing. This stinking brat. The Kirishin scolded jokingly. He almost hit Lin Ling's head with his pipe, because Lin Ling didn't give him any face. However, although he looked angry on the surface, he didn't care at all. This was because Lin Ling had used the word, old man, many times when he was with the Kirishin. Moreover, although Lin Ling was Lei Gong's trial taker to the Kirishin, he was like one of their own. Okay, it's rare for us to get together. Don't leave today. Stay for dinner. At this moment, the Thunder God walked over with a smile on his face. Okay. The Kirishin immediately agreed. After all, he and Lei Gong were close friends. Chapter 4265. That night, Lei Gong set up a banquet, causing Lei Gong's main hall to be bustling with noise and excitement. However, among all the trial challengers, only Lin Ling, Yang Qilin, and Saint Guyi were qualified to participate. Even the divine generals were not qualified. Lin Ling and Yang Qilin could participate because of their extraordinary status. As for Saint Guyi, it was naturally because of Lin Ling that Saint Guyi could stay. The bustling night quietly passed. The next day, Lei Gong also found Lin Ling and took out 3 divine springs as a reward for Lin Ling. This was the reward for Lin Ling after he became an 8-star trial challenger. Lin Ling, I didn't expect you to become one of the 8 new gods so soon after you returned. Keske, even I am extremely surprised. After seeing Lin Ling accept the divine springs, Lei Gong sighed and said. He was also very curious about Lin Ling. He did not understand how Lin Ling could fuse the 3 divine embryos. He also did not understand why Lin Ling's dimensional essence was so huge, even more terrifying than before. However, although he was curious, he did not ask too much. After all, he was also a god who had survived the era of the gods. He knew that the world was vast and anything was possible. Therefore, he was curious about how strong Lin Ling would be after he stepped into the realm of gods. However, all of this was unknown. After all, Lin Ling was not the reincarnation of a god. In the future, he could very likely surpass a mid-level god and possibly even become a high-level god. Putting away his thoughts, Lei Gong continued, Lin Ling, the 8-god celestial palace will open in a month. At that time, I will inform you to come back. Now, do you want to cultivate in Lei Gong's main hall? Lei Gong's main hall had a large number of cultivation exotic lands. All of them were treasured lands that were extremely rare. No need. I plan to go home and accompany my family. After all, sometimes cultivation is not just seclusion. Hearing this, Lin Ling shook his head and refused because he had been cultivating in seclusion for 4,000 years. He did not want to cultivate again after just returning. All right, I will inform you in a month. Lei Gong did not stop Lin Ling. He also knew that Lin Ling's strength had increased by leaps and bounds. If he continued to cultivate in seclusion at a certain time, the results would be even worse. After that, Lin Ling took his leave. When he left the Thunder God Great Hall, the 9 prefectures were already in turmoil. Because yesterday, during the Battle of the Gods, it was said that many experts were born. Among them, there were 100 great holy knights, 10 great generals, and the legendary 8 new gods. People were very curious about these legendary figures, especially the 8 new gods of the current era. They were like mysterious shadows that lingered in people's minds. It was as if they were looking up at the peak of the mountain, only to see 8 pitch-black figures standing there, looking down at them like gods. Some of these figures were holding swords, some had their hands behind their backs, and some were playing with flames. Everything was so mysterious. These 8 figures were the gods that they had been chasing for their entire lives, the gods that they had to look up to. I heard that the 8 new gods of the current era are formed by trial takers. Their strength has surpassed all the great generals, and they are the strongest under the 4 great gods. Yes, I know a divine knight. He was lucky enough to go to the void in Lei Gong's main hall and saw the investiture gods with his own eyes. I heard that the 8 new gods are very frightening. They can destroy the void with a single move. Moreover, they can transform into monsters and swallow millions of people in one gulp. Damn it, you're bragging. Please don't spread rumors. Although they are powerful, they don't eat people. Hee hee. I'm just a little excited. However, the 8 new gods of the current era, other than the gods, not many people know about them. It's said that they don't want to be exposed too quickly, so as to avoid being targeted by the Spirit Nation. Just wait, it won't be long before the truth comes out who the 8 new gods are. The news snowballed and quietly spread throughout the entire 9 states, and even to the 10,000 worlds. It was praised by countless martial artists. When Lin Ling arrived at the 9 states, he also noticed the rumors around him. He couldn't help but shake his head helplessly. The competition for the quota had just ended yesterday, and today, it had already spread throughout the 9 states. It seemed that news was always the fastest. Ignoring the news, Lin Ling walked towards snow-blowing city. In the city, people were also talking about the 8 new gods. Everyone was in high spirits and very excited. After all, in the age of the gods all had their own god positions. In this era there were finally god positions. The 8 new gods, the 10 great generals, and the 100 great sacred knights. This was the current investiture of the gods. This was also the investiture of the gods after the age of the blowout age. Lord Lin Ling is back. He just returned from the gods, so he must have heard the news. Go and ask him. When Lin Ling passed by the city governor's mansion, the guards immediately came up to him with smiles. One of the old men even handed him a pot of good wine and asked with a smile, "Lord Lin Ling, how was the battle between the gods yesterday?" This was because they all knew that Lin Ling was very approachable and didn't put on airs. That was why they dared to ask Lin Ling. When Lin Ling saw the good wine, he smiled and roughly told them the whole story of the battle. Congratulations to Lord Lin Ling for getting the quota. Hearing Lin Ling's words, the guards were all excited. Lin Ling, that's great. You got the quota? At this time, Xianxia, the city governor, also received the news that Lin Ling had returned. He rushed out of the mansion and asked curiously, "Who are the 100 great sacred knights, the 10 great generals, and the 8 new gods?" Alas, although I'm also a holy knight, my status is low and I can't go to Lord Lei Gong's place. That's why I don't know anything about them. The 100 great sacred knights and the 10 great generals. There are too many people, so I don't know much about them. However, I have met the 8 new gods once. And I know that one of them is me. Lin Ling drank the wine given by the guard and said casually, "What?" Hearing Lin Ling's words, the eyes of Xianxia and the others narrowed. That was because they had never thought that Lin Ling could become one of the 8 new gods. After all, Lin Ling had disappeared for so long. How could he have reached the top in one step after returning? Lin Ling, are you kidding? Xianxia stared at Lin Ling tongue-tied. Do I look like I'm kidding? Lin Ling looked at him strangely. He took another sip of the wine and threw it to Xianxia. At the same time he said with a smile, "Thank you for the good wine. I'll go home first." Seeing Lin Ling leave, Xianxia and the others were petrified. They thought that Lin Ling was joking. However, they had never seen Lin Ling joke about serious matters. However, Lin Ling had become one of the 8 new gods. His behavior was too nonchalant. It was as if he didn't care about the title of apotheosis at all. "My lord, slap me." I don't know if I'm dreaming or not. Song Chiri, one of the guards, said. Bang. Chapter 4266. The guard in the distance crawled back with a bloody nose and a swollen face. He cried and said, I only asked my lord to slap me, not kick me. But it hurts. It seems that this is not a dream. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha. Halfway through his crying, he immediately looked up to the sky and laughed, causing all the guards to laugh as well. Because they all knew that Lin Ling was from Snow-Blowing City and had been living here. This also meant that one of the 8 new gods was living in Snow-Blowing City. And for Snow-Blowing City, this was a matter of supreme honor. After Lin Ling returned to the courtyard, everyone immediately came to greet him. Then, like gossiping women, they began to ask questions. Lin Ling helplessly patted his forehead. Why were so many people interested in the matters of the gods? Then, he once again told the whole story. Without a doubt, everyone was shocked. Then, Yu and Yuer, and ancestor Tai Yan were all happy for Lin Ling. After chatting for a while, Lin Ling glanced around and suddenly asked curiously, Hey, where's Big Brother? Did he go out to train again? Ha ha ha. They didn't go out to train, but to compete for the position of the top 10 martial gods. Ha ha ha. Ancestor Tai Yan immediately said. Compete for the position of the top 10 martial gods? Ha ha ha. Lin Ling's pupils constricted. He was obviously very surprised, because he never thought that his big brother would have such strength. However, Lin Ling soon felt relieved. 100 years ago, although the top 10 martial gods were powerful, after the investiture of the gods, some sparrows could become phoenixes. On the contrary, it was possible for dragons to become earthworms now. Therefore, his big brother was not necessarily unqualified. Young Master Yao, Ma Jin Tianzi and the others also went. Ha ha ha. Seeing Lin Ling's surprised expression, Yu also said, because they are afraid that something will happen to Big Brother, many leaders of the God Slayer Alliance went to support him. Therefore, even if Big Brother fails, he should be fine. Ha ha ha. In that case, let's go and take a look. Ha ha ha. Lin Ling pondered for a moment and immediately said. After disappearing for 100 years, he also wanted to see what the current top 10 martial gods of the 9 prefectures were like. All those years ago in the divine world, he remembered that there were 2 martial gods that were eyeing him covetously. One of them was the Wave Mirage martial god, and the other was the Eternal martial god. He wondered how strong they'd become 100 years later. All right, let's go together. Upon hearing Lin Ling's words, Yu and Yuer and Shen Yuangur immediately jumped for joy. Then let's go together. Lin Ling happened to have nothing to do, so he left the final world with his 3 wives. After all, he didn't know where his big brother was challenging the 10 martial gods of the 9 prefectures. On the other hand, Yu and the others knew how to contact the God Slayer Alliance. In that case, they would definitely have a way. After a long time, Lin Ling and the others arrived at Heaven Pass City once again. However, this time, no one in Heaven Pass City dared to stop Lin Ling. When the city lord who had been sealed by Lin Ling not long ago, saw Lin Ling, his expression became incomparably complicated, although he still didn't know whether Lin Ling was a trial taker or not. However, he was clearly aware that he wasn't a match for that mysterious young man at all. City Lord, it's him again. More than a month ago, that guy destroyed Heaven Pass City. Should we capture him? Yes. Someone also noticed Lin Ling and immediately reported to the City Lord. Bullshit, let him pass. Yes. The City Lord didn't hesitate at all and shouted angrily. But this is too shameful. Yes. Those subordinates were very surprised. Heaven Pass City had suffered such a great loss, and now they saw that young man again. Could it be that they could only watch Azure Dragon leave? You can't afford to offend this person. Also, do you want Heaven Pass City to be destroyed again? Open the city gate and let them pass. Remember, tell those ignorant people not to provoke him. If anyone violates this order, they can bring their own head to see me. The city lord shouted majestically. Although those subordinates were very confused, they didn't dare to disobey the order and quietly pass down the message. This guy called Lin Ling is really arrogant. However, after he returned to the final world, it is said that he defeated many people. Most importantly, regarding this matter, the 4 great gods didn't stand out to say anything. There must be something fishy going on. Yes. After the city lord gave the order, he secretly wiped the sweat from his forehead. Then, he watched Lin Ling leave and finally let out a sigh of relief. After Lin Ling left for a full hour, an order was passed down. It was transmitted to all 36 cities in the final world. It was about the investiture of the 9 prefectures. It also stated that Lin Ling was a trial taker and the #1 in this competition. Plop. After reading the news, the city lord was so scared that he fell to the ground. Fortunately, he didn't stop Lin Ling before. Otherwise, things would be troublesome. He had a feeling that if he stopped Lin Ling from leaving the city again, who knew how many people would die? At this moment, Lin Ling didn't know about the changes in Heaven Pass City. He followed Yu and the others forward. Not long after, they arrived at an abandoned world in the eastern world. This world was very big, but the continent was filled with poisonous gas. It was not suitable for ordinary cultivators. Everyone who could come here was an expert. Therefore, there were countless experts in this realm. After all, the 10 great martial gods of the 9 prefectures were going to fight here today. How could people not be curious? After the investiture of the 9 prefectures, the 10 great martial gods had changed. Some became stronger while others became weaker. It was as if it was predestined. Other than martial god Di Lei, who was ranked 1st, and Luli Empress, who was ranked 2nd, the others had more or less changed. Among them, martial god Huan Bo and martial god Yin Qi, who had become martial gods 100 years ago, were eliminated again. Their positions were taken by Black Crow Elder and Mu Tianjian. However, the other martial gods' positions were also in danger. There was a possibility that their positions would be taken away at any time. After Lin Ling and Yu arrived at the world, they looked around and saw a large number of people flying forward. In the distance, there was a yellow ocean. The ocean was quiet and motionless. It emitted a strong smell of sulfur. Moreover, the smell was mixed with poisonous gas. At the edge of the ocean, even though it was far away, they could see the endless number of people. Look, that's Mountain Crusher Gentleman, who is ranked 18th on the Stairway to Heaven on the Divine ranking. That's nothing. I saw the top 10 experts on the Stairway to Heaven on the Divine ranking. I didn't expect that they would also come to fight for the 10 great martial gods of the 9 prefectures. Last time, martial god Huan Bo and the others were defeated. The battle was very exciting. I wonder which martial god's position will be taken away today. I heard that many leaders of the God Slayer Alliance are here today. They are eyeing the martial god's position covetously. Chapter 4267. As for Yu and the others, many people had been secretly in love with them for a long time. However, Yu and the others were too strong, so they only dared to look at them from afar and did not dare to profane them. Yu and the others have a man with them, and they seem to be very close to each other. It's Lin Ling. I heard that Lin Ling has returned. I didn't expect it to be true. Soon, everyone's eyes were fixed on Lin Ling, and they were shocked. Because they had heard the rumor that Lin Ling had returned, but they had not confirmed it. Now, they finally confirmed it. Lin Ling, haha, I didn't expect you to still be alive. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in front of them, and then a large number of people walked over. The person in the lead was Martial God Ripple. Last time in the Demon Forest, Lin Ling had given him a few hard slaps. He still remembered that. Moreover, in the Divine World, Lin Ling had failed to become a god in front of him. Therefore, when he saw Lin Ling now, he was not afraid at all. In his opinion, Lin Ling should have been eliminated by the 4 great gods. Without the identity of a trial taker, Lin Ling was like a dog to him. Come, kowtow to me 3 times. Maybe I'll spare your life if I'm in a good mood. Martial God Ripple sneered as if he was rewarding Lin Ling. The people beside him looked at Lin Ling with contempt and said with a faint smile, Yo, you disappeared for 100 years. How dare you come back? I heard that you were incomparably fierce in the past. He's still fierce now. I heard that when he just came back, he defeated many people outside Blizzard City. Haha, he only knows how to bully some trash. When he meets a real expert, he'll be defeated sooner or later. They were rejoicing in other people's misfortune. The main reason was that they had defeated a large number of experts in the past 100 years. They were very confident that they would even dare to fight against the people of the gods. However, due to the difference in status, they didn't dare to casually challenge the great generals. What a group of stupid people. Lin Ling shook his head in the face of those people's mockery and turned to Yu Yu. Yeah, ignore them. Let's go find Big Brother. Yu Yu and the others smiled and nodded. They knew Lin Ling's strength, so they felt that those people's ridicule were like clowns. What? You want to escape just like that? All right, I forgot that you, Lin Ling, are the great leader of the God Slayer Alliance. It's really sad that a great leader is weaker than all the other leaders. I really don't understand where you got the face to be their leader. Martial God Ripple Mirage mocked when he saw Lin Ling was about to leave. He'd been in a bad mood since his position as the martial god had been seized. Now that he saw Lin Ling, he naturally wanted to vent his displeasure on Lin Ling. Illusionary Wave Martial God. Is it? Is this all you've improved over the years? Lin Ling, who was taking a step forward, suddenly stopped and looked at Martial God Rippling Mirage with a mocking smile. Martial God Ripple's face darkened when he heard this. It was like pouring salt on his wound. Back then, you were at least one of the top 10 martial gods of the 9 prefectures. Unfortunately, after a few years of glory, you saw the latter surpass you. Now, when you meet the latter, I'm afraid you will only show a humble smile. Haha, if I were you, I would have found a deserted place to spend my old age in peace. Why don't you come and embarrass yourself? Lin Ling did not speak. His words were like poisonous thorns that stabbed into Martial God Ripple's heart. You're courting death. Martial God Ripple's followers were enraged. Although Martial God Ripple was no longer one of the top 10 martial gods in the 9 prefectures, he was still powerful. How could he be humiliated by Lin Ling? Your mouth stinks. Martial God Ripple waved his sleeve and took a step forward. He had made up his mind. You want to fight me, right? Fine. I'll humiliate you since I've just arrived. However, before Martial God Ripple could speak, Lin Ling already knew what he was thinking. Lin Ling did not think much of Martial God Ripple. However, the other party was being overbearing. Lin Ling would let him know how lowly he was. What? Lin Ling wants to fight Martial God Ripple. Didn't Lin Ling fail to ascend to godhood? Where does his confidence come from? Many people's eyes immediately looked over. They did not know about the battle between the gods, so they still thought that Lin Ling was not very strong. Therefore, Lin Ling was looking for trouble and asking for a beating. Perhaps he was so unbridled because he saw that there were experts from the God Slayer Alliance at the Yellow Sea. You want to fight me? Martial God Ripple laughed. He had not expected Lin Ling to be so foolish. He had been afraid that Lin Ling would not dare to fight him and would have to rely on Yuan Venerates and other martial gods to step in. However, it was fine. His position as martial god had been taken away and his reputation had been greatly reduced. Now, he could use this opportunity to trample on Lin Ling to raise his reputation. If you want to fight me, I'll fulfill your wish. I'll let you see the changes in JoJo over the past 100 years. However, you're lucky because the God Slayer Alliance is not far away. Therefore, I won't kill you. I'll just humiliate you a little. Come, I'll let you have 3 moves. Martial God Ripple walked forward step by step. With each step, powerful Jie Yuan permeated the air. However, although Jie Yuan was powerful, his divine fetus was only 2nd grade. No wonder he had been stripped of his position as martial god. Let you have 3 moves? Can Martial God Ripple do it? Don't underestimate Ripple. He has the strength of a peak martial god. His realm is stable and he has the power of a god. What's Lin Ling's cultivation realm? Everyone was curious. Even some people at the edge of the Yellow Sea looked over. Many people's eyes lit up when they heard that Lin Ling had come. Upon closer inspection, apart from Luli Empress and the other martial gods, who were ranked 1st and 2nd, all the other martial gods were there. They had never imagined that Lin Ling would actually dare to challenge Ripple Martial God Ripple. I heard that the kid had returned last time. Now that I've seen him today, it's indeed true. However, he dared to challenge Ripple Martial God Ripple as soon as he returned. He's very confident. The unfettered sword martial god smiled. He was inexplicably excited. However, he still had doubts about whether Lin Ling could defeat Ripple Martial God Ripple. Not far away, the Yuan Venerate martial god's eyes narrowed. He rubbed his eyes as if he couldn't believe that Lin Ling had really returned. However, he finally smiled when he saw everything clearly. That was really Lin Ling. It was Lin Ling, who had disappeared for 100 years. He came back to fight Ripple Martial God Ripple. I wonder how much his strength has improved. Of course, if he uses his trump card, defeating Ripple Martial God Ripple will be as easy as flipping his hand. The Yuan Venerate Martial God laughed. He wasn't worried that Lin Ling would lose. After all, he knew that Lin Ling had a powerful treasure that could easily kill a martial god. Chapter 4268. Haha, second brother is here. Just in time to support us. Sakura laughed loudly but did not walk over. After all, he knew that martial god Huan Bo was slightly weaker than him. Therefore, Lin Ling would definitely win within a dozen moves. Come on, Lin Ling. I'll give you 3 moves. As the God Slayer Alliance stared at Lin Ling, martial god Huan Bo roared as if he was afraid that no one would know. 3 moves. The God Slayer Alliance's members were dumbfounded. Who gave martial god Huan Bo such courage? After all, in their opinion, it should be Lin Ling who gave martial god Huan Bo 3 moves. They shook their heads. They could already foresee martial god Huan Bo's sorry state after 3 moves. Poor martial god Huan Bo still did not know Lin Ling's strength. He clasped his hands behind his back and raised his chin like an expert, signaling Lin Ling to attack. In his mind, he was already thinking of a way to win against Lin Ling. 3 moves. That's right, he would use his defense to injure Lin Ling. He would let everyone know that he, martial god Huan Bo, gave Lin Ling 3 moves. Not only was Lin Ling unable to injure him, but he was also injured. On the other hand, Lin Ling was also looking at martial god Ripple Mirage. He could see through martial god Ripple Mirage's strength with a single glance. Speaking of which, Lin Ling could defeat such an opponent without even moving. However, Lin Ling also saw that all the cultivators beside the Yellow Sea, other than the God Slayer Alliance, were not optimistic about Lin Ling's chances. Especially the ancient martial god and the others. At this moment, they were smiling mockingly as if they wanted to see a good show from Lin Ling. Forget it. Today is the day when Big Brother and young Master Yao compete for the martial god position. As their leader, I should support them and be their shield. Therefore, I'll show them my strength. Secretly shaking his head, Lin Ling decided to attack personally. Then he took a step forward and punched out fiercely. His 7 dantians and the strength of his flesh burst out at the same time, which was mixed with powerful godly force. You're here? Lin Ling, let me remind you, be careful not to be injured by me because I am at the peak of the martial god realm and I have a 2nd-grade divine embryo body. However, just as he finished shouting, he immediately felt that something was wrong, because when Lin Ling's fist arrived, he actually felt a wave of unstoppable boundary essence energy, which was even more terrifying than his own boundary essence. However, Lin Ling was clearly a 9th-layer martial god. He couldn't help but rub his eyes, deeply afraid that he had seen wrongly. However, the more he looked at it, the more terrified he felt. His heart was already filled with thousands of curses. He could sense that Lin Ling's divine embryo was a 3rd-grade one. Moreover, the divine embryo was extremely chaotic, as if there was more than one type. Block it! Use all your strength. You must block it. At this instant, martial god Huan Bo regretted his decision. He shouldn't have given Lin Ling a handicap. Bang! He no longer cared about his reputation. He threw a punch forward, producing circles of ripples. However, as soon as his fist collided with Lin Ling's, a great force surged into his arm, shattering his bones with a crack. Damn it, you're no ordinary 9th-layer martial god. Martial god Huan Bo subconsciously yelled, ignoring the pain. It's too late for you to realize that now. Lin Ling's punch was like a total annihilation. He had used the simplest and most domineering method to shatter martial god Huan Bo's punch. Following this, martial god Huan Bo was sent flying like a cannonball, flying toward the Yellow Sea in the distance. His previous plan of using Lin Ling to raise his reputation had failed. The crowd dropped their jaws when they saw Lin Ling sending martial god Huan Bo flying with a single punch. The script was completely different from what they had imagined. Meanwhile, the eyes of the martial gods around the Yellow Sea glittered. Lin Ling had been in the limelight 100 years ago. Now that he had disappeared for 100 years, although they assumed Lin Ling would not be too weak, his strength had not reached the martial god realm, let alone the fact that he had defeated a martial god with a single punch. Martial god Huan Bo lost? That's too unbelievable. What do you mean he lost? Martial god Huan Bo was only sent flying because of his carelessness. Besides, have you forgotten that martial god Huan Bo gave Lin Ling a handicap of 3 moves? I can only say that Lin Ling doesn't need martial god Huan Bo to give him a handicap, but martial god Huan Bo hasn't lost yet. You're right. The crowd still could not believe the outcome. They kept consoling themselves. After all, even though Lin Ling was famous, it was only because of his identity as a trial participant. On the other hand, martial god Huan Bo had relied on his own strength. Therefore, the crowd subconsciously assumed that martial god Huan Bo had not lost yet. Look, martial god Huan Bo is up. Suddenly, someone exclaimed as he pointed into the distance. A figure slowly stood up at the edge of the yellow poisonous sea. Then he walked back step by step like a giant. His face was gloomy and he seemed to be angry. It seems like martial god Huan Bo is going all out. Seeing martial god Huan Bo's angry look, many people clenched their fists and looked forward to the exciting battle to come. Many of the 10 martial gods smiled. They thought that it was too unreal for Lin Ling to defeat martial god Huan Bo with a single punch. Now, it seemed like they were overthinking it. At this moment, martial god Huan Bo finally stopped and stared coldly at Lin Ling in the distance. Lin. He let out a low roar as if he had pushed the battle to its peak. However, just as the crowd was anticipating the outcome, martial god Huan Bo suddenly fell on his back. He was completely defeated before he could utter the word, Lin. Plop. When the sound of his body hitting the ground resounded, the yellow sea became even more silent. He had truly defeated martial god Huan Bo with a single punch. The punch from before might have seemed simple, but it had undoubtedly made Lin Ling's name known to all. He had disappeared for 100 years and people had thought that he had been eliminated. Now, with a single punch, everyone had returned. And this return was not only in the world of gods, but also in the void of the 9 states. Leader. The powerhouses of the God Slayer Alliance all bowed when they saw Lin Ling. They were filled with pride because the most mysterious leader of the God Slayer Alliance had also come to compete for the position of martial god in the 9 states. Furthermore, he had used his domineering strength to intimidate the powerhouses of the 9 states. The scene remained silent. Of course, the ones with the most complicated feelings were the 10 martial gods of the 9 states. The unrestrained sword martial god, Yuan venerate martial god, and martial god Qingning all had the same expression on their faces. That was disbelief. Lin Ling, are you here to compete for the position of martial god? Suddenly, a voice was heard. One of the 10 martial gods, martial god Duanmai, had already spoken. He also stared gravely at Lin Ling. He thought back to the Battle of the Gods. At that time, Lin Ling had used his trump card to force him to retreat. Who would have thought that 100 years later, Lin Ling would actually grow to such a level? Fortunately, Lin Ling had only defeated martial god Huan Bo. He was still no match for martial god Duanmai. Chapter 4269. Currently, there were many people who wanted to compete for the position of martial god, including the top 10 martial gods. They wanted to consolidate their position, but Lin Ling also wanted to join the competition? Sorry, I'm not interested in the position of martial god. At this moment, Lin Ling spoke calmly. Merely. Everyone's eyes widened. The top 10 martial gods were the strongest 10 kings in the 9 continents. Countless people wanted to obtain this position, but Lin Ling said it was merely? Could it be that Lin Ling thought he had surpassed the top 10 martial gods? I'm here to be the judge. At this moment, Lin Ling spoke again. Judge? Lin Ling looked down on the position of martial god and thought he was the judge? This news was even more shocking than before. Soon after, the crowd burst into laughter. Even the martial gods were laughing. One must know that to become the judge of the top 10 martial gods in the 9 continents, one must have supreme prestige and strength. Only then could one decide the position of the top 10 martial gods in the 9 continents. Lin Ling, on the other hand, had only defeated martial god Ripple Mirage. This wasn't enough. Moreover, Lin Ling wasn't a trial taker, so he didn't have the status. You're the judge? Are you qualified? Lin Ling, you're really arrogant. Do you know what it means to be a judge? It means that the top 10 martial kings in the 9 continents have been decided by you, including the number 1 martial god Delay and Luli Empress. Do you think you can do it? What a joke! Voices rang out one after another. Everyone laughed loudly because Lin Ling's idea was already boundlessly arrogant, reaching straight to the sky. Therefore, when they laughed, some of the more exaggerated ones even rolled on the ground laughing. Even Sakura and the others narrowed their eyes. Although Lin Ling's strength was very strong, it seemed like a fool's dream to want to dominate the top 10 martial gods in the 9 continents. Only Yu Yu and the others secretly smiled. They knew that Lin Ling was definitely qualified because Lin Ling was already one of the 8 new gods. It seems that all of you are dissatisfied with me as the referee. Fine, those who support me step forward. Those who don't, raise your hands. Ignoring the mockery of the crowd, Lin Ling said indifferently. This was because he had secretly investigated and discovered that his big brother, young Master Yao, and the others weren't weak. They had a high chance of competing for the position of the 10 great martial gods. Therefore, he wanted to prevent some unfair matters from occurring. Therefore, he wanted to be the judge himself. Moreover, he wanted his big brother and the others to become the 10 great martial gods of the 9 provinces. Lin Ling, you must be dreaming. What ability do you have to have someone support you? Hearing Lin Ling's words, everyone laughed even louder. Duan, my martial god, Wangu martial god, and the others smirked. Although they admitted that Lin Ling was very strong, it was obvious that Lin Ling wasn't strong enough to stand above them. They even thought it was a joke. After this, they believed that no one would support Lin Ling anymore. I support it. However, just as they thought that, a voice rang out and they saw Sakura taking a step forward. Me too. So did young Master Yao. We all support it. The experts of the God Slayer Alliance also walked out one after another to support Lin Ling, including us. Yu Yu and Inuere looked at each other and also took a step forward. To be honest, in terms of reputation, they were more reputable than Lin Ling. After all, Lin Ling had disappeared for 100 years. This was especially so for Sakura, Yu Yu, and the others. They were now well-known figures in the entire 9 provinces. With so many experts supporting Lin Ling, it undoubtedly made the surrounding mockery disappear slightly. Of course, there were also people who were dissatisfied. Hee, we're all on the same side. No wonder. At that moment, a sinister voice suddenly rang out. The speaker had long hair that covered his face, but there was a cold glint in his eyes. He was martial god Yin Qi, one of the 10 great martial gods of 9 provinces. However, 20 years ago, he had been defeated by Mu Tianjian and his martial god position had been taken away. Now, he had suffered the same fate as martial god Huan Bo. Of course, he had also been cultivating bitterly over the past 20 years. Today, he had come to reclaim his martial god position. Therefore, it was impossible for him to listen to Lin Ling's orders. That's right, we're all on the same side. We'll definitely speak up for each other. The others sneered when they heard this. I support him. However, at that moment, another voice rang out that didn't come from the God Slayer Alliance. This made everyone look around and they were all stunned. The speaker was a Yuan Venerate martial god. This time, there were people among the 10 great martial gods supporting Lin Ling. This undoubtedly made Lin Ling's authority stronger. Yuan Venerate martial god. Are you crazy? You are a martial god monarch, yet you actually intend to be controlled by a junior. The ancient martial god's expression turned cold as he shouted. However, before the Yuan Venerate martial god could say anything, another voice rang out. I also support Lin Ling. This time, it was the unfettered sword martial god. I also support him. However, before the initial shock subsided, another martial god monarch spoke up. This time, it was Emperor Miao, who was also martial god Qingning. Although martial god Qingning wasn't very familiar with Lin Ling, he had interacted with him many times. Therefore, he would naturally help Lin Ling. 3 martial god monarchs. Everyone's hearts thundered. Those who had been rolling on the ground because they had mocked Lin Ling had now gotten up, their faces filled with disbelief. There were a total of 8 martial god monarchs present, and 3 of them supported Lin Ling. At the very least, Lin Ling's qualifications had increased once again. It seems like I have good relations with people. Now, who else is against me? Lin Ling wasn't surprised to see 3 martial gods supporting him. However, he believed that there would still be many voices against him. Sure enough, someone immediately sneered. Although there are people supporting you, that's all there is to it. After all, there are clearly more people against you. Lin Ling, We saw that you were the great leader of the God Destruction Alliance, so we gave you a chance to speak. Otherwise, we would have already treated you as bullshit. The person who spoke was still Martial God Xianxia. After he finished speaking, he lifted his head and looked at Lin Ling. His cold eyes were filled with fearlessness. Does this mean that you want to oppose me? Lin Ling smiled back at him. Yes, so what? Martial God Xianxia nodded and continued to look fearlessly at Luo Yunyang. Swoosh. However, just as he finished speaking, a white thunderbolt flashed out. By the time Xianxia Martial God reacted, a figure had already appeared in front of him. Then, a palm that was mixed with thunderbolts gently landed on Xianxia Martial God's chest. Bang! Martial God Xianxia's figure was knocked backward by the powerful force. Meanwhile, his eyes were filled with a stern look. It's Lin Ling. Such a powerful force. Now, do I have the qualifications? 8 wings appeared on Lin Ling's back. It was as if he was suppressing Martial God Xianxia with an overwhelming force. Chapter 4270. You're still not qualified. As for Martial God Xianxia, his bones were tough enough. He still sneered. However, just as he finished speaking, the white lightning arrived once again. Another palm landed on his chest. Now, do I have the right? The voice drifted out again. Martial God Xianxia was speechless. He was shocked by Lin Ling's strength. His strength was slightly stronger than Martial God Huan Bo. Therefore, he thought that Lin Ling was not much stronger than him. However, it seemed that he could not block Lin Ling's attack at all. Now, do I have the right? In the eyes of the crowd, Lin Ling was suppressing Martial God Xianxia and beating him up. Martial God Xianxia kept retreating and howling as he was beaten. In the end, a helpless and shocked voice finally drifted out. You have the right. The voice came from Martial God Xianxia. Looking at his black face, he seemed to be very sullen. After he finished speaking, Lin Ling finally stopped attacking. This caused the crowd to grit their teeth. This was a confession of torture. I also object. However, just as Martial God Xianxia was defeated, another voice of objection rang out. This time, it was a one-armed man. He held a broken sword in his hand. He was dressed in cotton clothes and had short hair. His face had a unique vicissitudes of life. Mu Tianjian. The crowd raised their heads and their eyes flickered quietly. Mu Tianjian was one of the 9 prefecture's 10 great martial gods. He had a 4th-grade divine fetus. Most importantly, he was an expert who had stepped into the half-deity realm. Lin Ling, right? I don't have any opinions about you. However, you want to dominate the 9 prefecture's martial god position as soon as you arrived. This is too overbearing. Clang! A broken sword was pointed at Lin Ling. The seemingly calm finger pointed at the sky of the Yellow Sea. Purple clouds came from the east. This was the purple sky 10,000 miles. The purple clouds shrouded an area of 10,000 miles, making it look sacred and majestic. The purple clouds even rushed out of the boundary and rushed into the void. And within the surging purple gas, there was a powerful divine energy that was overflowing, and it was actually about to reach the ranks of 1,000. Lin Ling looked at the sky and then at the one-armed man standing on a hill. He nodded slightly. This Mu Tianjian's strength was not bad, almost comparable to the crown prince. The only weak point was the divine fetus. Come on, beat me into submission. Mu Tianjian was a man of few words. He used his sword to express his thoughts. Mu Tianjian is the true king of martial gods. If Lin Ling can defeat him, then it means that Lin Ling is truly one of the 10 great martial gods of the 9 prefectures. The others also had looks of anticipation. Whoosh! Lin Ling did not say much. The tyrant's song sword appeared and he used Luai's true god. With a boom, the Yellow Sea began to tremble. The originally calm seawater now all rushed into the sky. Looking at the sky again, white lightning wreaked havoc, turning into a pool of lightning. This made everyone once again shocked at Lin Ling's strength. Lin Ling has made his move. However, no one expected that Lin Ling would make his move right after releasing his strength. One must know that Mu Tianjian was a sword artist, and a sword artist's attack was the sharpest. Generally speaking, it was best to wait for a sword artist to reveal an opening before attacking. But attacking rashly was very risky, unless one had absolute confidence. Confidence. Divine fetus of lightning? Mu Tianjian's eyes flashed. The broken sword let out a buzzing sound, and a powerful sword slashed out. Endless purple clouds surged like a tide, drowning Lin Ling. Clang! However, Lin Ling's sword was also very fast. It descended from the sky, slashing apart the purple clouds, and heavily landed on the broken sword. Boom! The ground under Mu Tianjian's feet turned into fine powder. Mu Tianjian raised his head and said indifferently, "Lin Ling, a famous figure 100 years ago. People say that he has already disappeared with the wind, but I think that he is still as sharp as ever." Chi! 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 The two swords rubbed against each other, and dazzling sparks blossomed. Lin Ling used the Luai's true body sword, but it was actually unable to make Mu Tianjian move at all. From this point of view, the 10 great martial gods of the 9 prefectures were indeed powerful. They were even more powerful than many of the 4 great gods. However, Lin Ling did not believe in heresy. He raised the sword in his hand again, as if he was going to smash it down. Boom! 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 Every time he smashed it down, the yellow sea would jump, and the poisonous sea with the smell of sulfur would soar into the sky. Then, it would fall down like rain, but it was all blocked by the boundary essence on the experts' bodies. Under Lin Ling's several strikes, Mu Tianjian was still as steady as a stone statue. This was very terrifying. After all, even if an ordinary person could withstand Lin Ling's strike, it was impossible for them to not move at all. However, Mu Tianjian was able to do so. He had the ability to do so. Of course, although Mu Tianjian seemed to be motionless, he had actually withstood a powerful attack. However, his purple mist was mysterious. It was comprehended in a secret realm in the divine realm. It was said that it was left behind after the War of the Gods. It could make a cultivator immortal for millions of years, and no evil could invade them. Borrowing this purple mist, Mu Tianjian was able to remain unmoved even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him. Mu Tianjian raised his head and looked at Lin Ling indifferently. He remembered Lin Ling because Lin Ling was a stronger opponent than he had imagined. However, the corner of his mouth also curled up. He knew that it was impossible for Lin Ling to break his sword. Now it was time for him to attack. Whoosh! However, at this moment, Lin Ling leaped up and disappeared in midair. Then, he appeared in front of everyone again with the sword in his hand. This time, there was no longer any white lightning around Lin Ling. Instead, it was the first stage of the innate fusion. An even stronger physical strength, an even stronger divine power, poured into the sword and slashed down. What? Mu Tianjian's eyes flickered. Lin Ling could still become stronger? Boom! After another clash of swords, Mu Tianjian could no longer remain motionless. He was forcefully slashed into the ground. The ground cracked open and a bottomless pit appeared. The surging water of the Yellow Sea also flowed in from afar. Above the huge pit, Lin Ling and Mu Tianjian disappeared into it. Then, the ground continued to shake as if an intense battle was taking place underground. Lin Ling actually sent Mu Tianjian flying. The martial gods narrowed their eyes, especially the Duan lineage martial god and the ancient martial god. Their faces were solemn. They did not expect Lin Ling to be so much stronger than they had imagined. Rumble! The continental plates kept shaking as if there was an earthquake. The water of the Yellow Sea rushed out from the cracks on the ground and flooded the ground. This scene was an eye-opener for everyone. They were shocked by the strength of Lin Ling and Mu Tianjian. The top 10 experts on the stairway to heaven on the divine ranking were trembling. There was a hint of unwillingness in their eyes. 100 years ago, although Lin Ling was famous, he was still not in the top 10 of the stairway to heaven on the divine ranking. However, 100 years later, Lin Ling had surpassed the stairway to heaven on the divine ranking. This progress was too terrifying. In the end, the rumbling sound continued to weaken and gradually disappeared. Chapter 4271. Boom! As soon as these words were spoken, everyone's hearts exploded. They knew that Lin Ling had completely defeated Mu Tianjian. Otherwise, with Mu Tianjian's temperament, he would never say such words himself. As a result, 2 experts had been completely defeated by Lin Ling. In addition to the God-Slayer Alliance and the other 3 martial gods, the number of people who didn't oppose Lin Ling had decreased by a lot. Lin Ling nodded at Mu Tianjian. Then he looked at the crowd and said, "Now, who still opposes? You. Or you?" Yes. Mu Tianjian was a true swordsman. The previous confrontation was also open and above board. Therefore, Lin Ling respected him a lot. Similarly, Mu Tianjian didn't have any grudges against Lin Ling. He was just unconvinced. However, after experiencing Lin Ling's powerful attack, he was also convinced. Opposes. Many people subconsciously lowered their heads when Lin Ling's gaze swept over them. In this world, strength determined everything. Now, Lin Ling was using his powerful strength to prove whether he was qualified or not. This old man will challenge you. At this time, another expert walked out. He was wearing a black feather cloak that reached the ground. He looked very mysterious. He looked very old and his face was very cold. However, this kind of coldness wasn't indifference. Instead, it was a kind of coldness that was heartless to the outside world. He gave people the feeling that he was a tree or a rock. Ahead, he was holding a palm-sized cauldron in his hand. The cauldron was somewhat sinister. On the surface, there was a skeleton and a crow sculpture. And he was one of the 10 martial gods of the 9 prefectures, Black Crow Old Man. Bang! He threw the cauldron on the ground. The cauldron grew bigger and bigger until it was as big as a city. The black cauldron began to emit black smoke. Moreover, there seemed to be a mysterious object flying inside. Crow! An ear-piercing sound rang out at the same time. It actually caused endless ripples. Oh! The martial artists around the Yellow Sea immediately felt a splitting headache. The weaker ones directly fell to the ground and vomited blood. Their bodies were twitching non-stop. It was extremely terrifying. Not good. That cauldron is very evil. The experts of the God Extermination Alliance also retreated one after another. Only after they had retreated tens of thousands of miles away did that ear-piercing sound weaken slightly. Looking at Indra and the others again, their strength was stronger and they relied on their powerful divine embryos to block that sound. However, they were also looking at Black Crow Old Man seriously, because this person was very mysterious. He had only risen in a single night and had once killed millions of experts in a single night in Yen province. After that, he vanished without a trace and reappeared again. Now, he had become one of the top 10 martial gods in the 9 prefectures. Crow! Those ear-piercing cries were also surging towards Lin Ling at that moment, causing Lin Ling's pupils to dilate. He immediately sensed that the meridians in his body were beginning to break inch by inch. It should be known that when a martial artist cultivated to the martial god realm, their meridians would be as vast and boundless as the void. These meridians also carried the world origin and the spirit. If one's meridians were broken inch by inch, then even if one had powerful strength, they wouldn't be able to display it. Lin Ling couldn't help but look at the people rolling on the ground in pain. He knew what kind of pain they were enduring. Because their strength was lower, their meridians weren't as majestic as Lin Ling's. Now that their meridians were broken inch by inch, they would probably be forcefully crippled. There was even a possibility of death. What a strange evil artifact. Lin Ling's body was strong, so he could still resist a little. His soul force also spread out, wanting to investigate the origin of that black cauldron. After his soul force surged out, Lin Ling discovered that the black cauldron's cries seemed to be soul force, but it also carried the power of the steps of God. Of course, this steps of God wasn't strong and couldn't be compared to Lin Ling's steps of wisdom. Most importantly, Lin Ling discovered that the black cauldron was actually a living creature. And it was a divine embryo, moreover, a divine embryo that had reached the 5th grade. A 5th grade divine embryo? One of the 9 prefectures' top 10 martial gods actually possessed a 5th grade divine embryo. This kind of strength wasn't weak even among the gods. Looks like I was almost fooled by him. Lin Ling retreated, avoiding those ear-piercing cries. This also slowed down the speed of his meridians breaking inch by inch. Lin Ling retreated. Does he know he's no match? Black Crow Old Man's attack is too strange. It's not a King's Path attack. It's normal for Lin Ling to avoid the attack. If he can't break that black cauldron, Lin Ling won't be able to defeat Black Crow Old Man. Seeing Lin Ling retreat, many people were whispering. Unrestrained Sword Martial God and the others were discussing spiritedly. They had obviously come into contact with Black Crow Old Man before. However, due to his mysterious methods, they didn't dare to rashly provoke Black Crow Old Man. Therefore, Lin Ling avoiding the attack was also a very normal thing. At this moment, Lin Ling also spoke indifferently. This cauldron probably seals no less than 100 million souls. Hearing this, Black Crow Old Man raised his head. His eyes were filled with ripples as he spoke in a hoarse voice. Lin Ling, your eyesight isn't bad. His voice was like the cry of a nighthawk, very ear-piercing. However, so what if you know? Perhaps, you'll be the next soul in the cauldron. Soon after, Black Crow Old Man laughed evilly. This was also the first time he laughed in front of everyone. Because he wasn't like the others, he knew that Lin Ling had already seized back the identity of a trial taker. Moreover, he had obtained the quota for the 8 Gods' Heavenly Palaces contest. His identity wasn't weak at all. Therefore, he wanted to defeat Lin Ling and make a name for himself by stepping on Lin Ling. Because he always had a grand dream in his heart, and that was to establish the 9 prefectures' #1 divine sect, Black Crow Sect. You're too confident. Now watch me break you. At this moment, Lin Ling's voice was much colder. He held the tyrannical song sword and shot forward. What was surprising was that the tyrannical song sword, which was as large as a door, was extremely light, as if it was a flying immortal. Crows. At this moment, the black cauldron, which was as large as an ancient city, seemed to be suffused with smoke and fire. Endless black fog rushed towards Lin Ling. Within it, a large number of strange black crows were flying. These black crows had the wings of crows, but their chests were human bones. Moreover, their pupils were also human pupils. As they rushed towards Lin Ling, their cries became louder. Their cries became louder. Bang! 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 The suddenly louder cries also caused the martial artists in the distance to immediately sense that their meridians had been broken. Retreat a little further. Towards these strange powers, people were completely helpless. Only when Jie Yuan and Divine Embryo reached a certain level could they resist them. From a certain point of view, these cries were also very invincible. Boom! However, Lin Ling's speed did not stop. Instead, he activated the second stage of his innate skill fusion, and his strength instantly increased. When the gold and white wings appeared, the Duanmai martial god and the others could not be bothered to be surprised by the black cauldron. They all stared at Lin Ling, their faces filled with disbelief. This was because they did not expect that Lin Ling still had a trick up his sleeve. Swoosh! After his strength increased, Lin Ling clearly did not fear that power. He held the tyrannical song sword and shot towards the black fog. Lin Ling can resist those cries. He's going to attack Black Crow Old Man. Chapter 4272. Because even they couldn't find a way to break Black Crow Old Man's technique. Therefore, they hoped that Lin Ling could break it. Of course, they were powerful and Black Crow Old Man couldn't do anything to them. It was a tie. However, their guess was wrong. Because Lin Ling didn't pay attention to Black Crow Old Man. His sword shot towards the black cauldron. Crazy! Such a choice made the carefree sword martial god shout. Because everyone knew that the black cauldron was strange and couldn't be attacked by force. Black Crow Old Man was the cauldron controller. As long as he was defeated, the black cauldron would lose control. However, Lin Ling was different. He actually attacked the black cauldron. This was also against the rules. Lin Ling has rich battle experience. He should know this. He must have seen something that we can't see. Martial god Qing Ning frowned and said, Clang! At this moment, Lin Ling's sharp sword landed on the black cauldron that was as large as an ancient city. It actually caused the ancient city to shake and sway. You mere mortals want to break me. What was surprising was that the ancient city actually emitted a low voice. Is that so? Lin Ling kept his sword and slapped out with his right hand. His powerful soul force formed the steps of wisdom and suppressed. Grand Cardinal Brahma Punishment Technique. Now, Lin Ling's soul force was his strongest asset. It surpassed his physical body and realm and reached a new realm. Even Lin Ling didn't know what the limit of his steps of wisdom was now. This was because he rarely used this technique. The last time he used it, even the City Lord of Heaven Pass City was forcefully sealed without being able to resist at all. Soul-type steps of God. Who are you? Why do you have such a technique? Could it be that you're the reincarnation of a god? When Lin Ling's soul force gushed out, the ancient city also let out a furious roar. At this moment, it was clearly panicking. Because the steps of God was a technique from the era of gods. Moreover, there weren't many people who had such a technique back then. However, there was someone who was able to use it today, and he was able to use it at a very high level. I know that the so-called Black Crow Old Man is nothing more than a puppet. The The real Black Crow Old Man is you. I didn't expect that in the twilight of the gods, when 10,000 gods fell, you, a god, actually didn't die. Lin Ling stretched out a single hand, and his soul force continuously gushed out. Let me go, let me go. You and I are both gods from the era of the gods. Why do you have to force me? Gu Cheng's voice became even more panicked. In your dreams. Lin Ling let out a low growl, sending out all of his soul power. At the same time he said coldly, I'm sorry to tell you this. First, I'm not some reincarnated god. Secondly, although you were a god back then, your methods were vicious and cruel. For your own selfish reasons, you slaughtered tens of millions of martial artists and collected their souls. Then you wouldn't be a god. Boom. With Lin Ling's final words, the entire ancient city was sealed. No method could be used. Sword come. Next, Lin Ling let out a furious roar. Tyrannical Song's sword flew over. After being grabbed by him, he held the sword with both hands and cut the ancient city piece by piece like cutting tofu. After the ancient city was broken, a large number of souls immediately soared into the sky, flying towards the distance like a tide. Suddenly, a large bronze door appeared. The door opened, welcoming these souls. And this door was the door to the underworld. Because of the Black Cauldron's seal, those who died couldn't reincarnate. Now that the Black Cauldron was broken, the souls naturally entered the underworld and reincarnated. Lin Ling, you spoiled my good deed. I won't let you off. However, among the drifting souls, a sinister voice also floated out. However, it was hidden very well, hiding among the souls, so even Lin Ling couldn't sense it. He escaped. Lin Ling secretly regretted. He knew that if he couldn't kill Black Crow Old Man this time, he would definitely be plotted against by Black Crow Old Man in the future. After all, Black Crow Old Man was a true god. Because he had just revived, he wasn't strong. In the future, he would definitely be a huge threat. Although the age of gods couldn't be compared to the ancient era, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. After that, Lin Ling muttered to himself. When he returned this time, he originally thought that he was the #1 person under the 4 great gods. But now, it seemed that after the 9 prefectures' investiture of gods, some experts indeed exceeded his expectations. After all, if he didn't have the step of wisdom, he wouldn't be able to break the Black Cauldron even if he had powerful methods. He could only end up with his meridians broken or escape from here. Black Crow Old Man also lost. Looking at the disappearing Black Cauldron, everyone seemed to have awakened from a dream. Their understanding of Lin Ling rose again, leaving a huge shadow in their hearts. What happened? On the contrary, Black Crow Old Man's eyes regained clarity as he said blankly, Black Crow Old Man, you've already lost. Go die. At this moment, the Duan lineage martial god suddenly rushed over. Mixed with a ferocious divine power, he slapped towards Black Crow Old Man. He obviously wanted to kill Black Crow Old Man. Because when Black Crow Old Man rose to power, he had a grudge with the Duan lineage martial god. Now that the Black Cauldron was broken, the Duan lineage martial god naturally had no fear. Clang! However, when his heavenly fate wheel arrived, it was blocked by a sword. It was Lin Ling. Scram! Lin Ling slashed with his sword horizontally. That heavenly fate wheel was cut in half by the sword and exploded in the distant sky. The Duan lineage martial god's pupils constricted in shock. Lin Ling actually broke his move so easily? One must know that when they were in the god realm, he, the Duan lineage martial god, was suppressing Lin Ling. The previous move was something that Lin Ling couldn't break no matter how hard he tried. But now, it was as easy as blowing off dust. Suppressing the shock in his heart, the Duan lineage martial god said angrily, Lin Ling, what are you doing? In order to refine the Black Cauldron, Black Crow Old Man killed countless people. Don't you think it's against the heavens for you to stop me? He isn't Black Crow Old Man. Lin Ling was still holding his sword as he looked indifferently at the Duan lineage martial god and said. As soon as he said that, everyone was suspicious. After all, when Lin Ling used the step of wisdom, they didn't see the process as it was blocked by the rolling black fog. Lin Ling, what is the meaning of this? Martial god Qingning also spoke. Although she didn't have any relationship with the Duan lineage martial god, she also knew about Black Crow Old Man's cruel methods. Naturally, she also wanted Black Crow Old Man to die. Because the real Black Crow Old Man is that Black Cauldron. This person is just a puppet. Lin Ling's gaze swept across the crowd as he explained the matter. What? After knowing the truth, everyone exclaimed in surprise. How do you know? The Duan lineage martial god was also shocked. However, he frowned and asked because even he couldn't tell the truth. Chapter 4273. So that's how it is. In that case, we've all been deceived. The divine fetus of the age of gods is indeed terrifying. That kind of method isn't something we can see through. Fortunately, there's Lin Ling otherwise, who knows if Black Crow Old Man will kill us later. Everyone came to a sudden realization. They were surprised by Lin Ling's methods and fearful of Black Crow Old Man's strength. In that case, he's a fake. The Duan lineage martial god also nodded and turned to walk back. Since that old man was a puppet, then it didn't matter whether he killed him or not. Of course, the most important thing was that with Lin Ling around, he couldn't kill him. However, just as the Duan lineage martial god's footsteps moved, Lin Ling's voice sounded, "Duan lineage martial god, how about a fight?" Now, it seems that the voices opposing me are getting smaller and smaller. Only a few of you martial god kings are left, and you seem to be one of them. He, Lin Ling, wanted to fight the Duan lineage martial god. Back then in the divine realm, Lin Ling was suppressed and beaten. Now, Lin Ling wanted to see if the Duan lineage martial god still had such ability. Me. The Duan lineage martial god stopped and said in a low voice. Hesitation appeared in his heart. Because Lin Ling had already released stunning strength and defeated one expert after another. In addition, he had exchanged a move with Lin Ling. He knew how powerful Lin Ling was. Therefore, he didn't have the confidence to defeat Lin Ling. I don't object. After pondering for a moment, the Duan lineage martial god gritted his teeth and said. After saying this, his heart seemed to have been ruthlessly humiliated. But if he didn't object, Lin Ling didn't want to fight him? What a joke. Back then, the Duan lineage martial god had almost wanted to kill him, Lin Ling. I killed the last bloodline of your Duan family. You don't want revenge. Lin Ling said again. Lin Ling, don't go too far. That sentence was undoubtedly like a sword, ruthlessly stabbing into the Duan lineage martial god's heart. How could he not want revenge? Even in his dreams. But today's Lin Ling was no longer the same as before. He was no longer a junior who could compete with Duan Wuhan, but a master who could compete with him. As the patriarch of the Duan clan, do you really not dare to fight in front of your enemy? Where is your courage? Where is the honor of your Duan clan? Lin Ling's voice was like thunder. The entire Yellow Sea was filled with Lin Ling's voice. His voice was so loud that everyone's eardrums hurt. Now, they had finally witnessed Lin Ling's tyranny. It was true that he would amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Previously, Lin Ling had said that he, Lin Ling, disdained to compete for the position of one of the top 10 martial gods in the 9 prefectures. But now, it seemed that Lin Ling was indeed qualified to say this. Seeing Lin Ling constantly humiliating his Duan clan, the Duan lineage martial god was so angry that his face turned red. He almost lost control of his temper. He really wanted to fight with Lin Ling to the end. However, he had lived for thousands of years after all. He immediately knew that this was Lin Ling's provocation. Lin Ling could not wait to have a bloody battle with him so that he could seize the opportunity to kill him, the Duan lineage martial god. I don't want to fight. Gritting his teeth, the Duan lineage martial god still refused to fight. After saying this, his fists were clenched so tightly that his nails pierced his palms, but he did not seem to feel it. Because Lin Ling was already aggressive, but the Duan lineage martial god still did not dare to fight. This was a great shame for the Duan lineage martial god and the Duan clan. This shame would also cover the Duan clan's head for thousands of years and be laughed at for thousands of years. When Lin Ling saw that the Duan lineage martial god had admitted defeat, he secretly admired him. This was because the Duan lineage martial god was indeed powerful to be able to give up his face and dignity to preserve his life. However, Lin Ling still did not intend to let him go. Since he could not find an excuse to attack, then he would attack by force. I just want to fight with you. Lin Ling held the tyrant song sword in his hand and swept out. A simple horizontal slash was slashed out. However, although it looked simple, it was mixed with 1,500 strands of divine power. The divine power was secondary. The truly terrifying thing was the fusion of the 3 divine embryos. Because these were all 5th-grade divine embryos. The human king, the thunder god, and the King Kong appeared behind Lin Ling, making Lin Ling seem like he was dominating the world. Heavenly Fate Wheel. Seeing Lin Ling's sword slashing over, the Duan lineage martial god was furious. This Lin Ling was indeed difficult to deal with. He activated the strongest Heavenly Fate Wheel and slapped out with his palm. The power was also terrifying. However, after confronting Lin Ling's 3 divine embryos, it was immediately cut apart. There was even a sharp sword radiance that cut off a strand of the Duan lineage martial god's hair. If the Duan lineage martial god had not dodged quickly, he would not have been able to escape the fate of being injured. The Duan lineage martial god kept retreating. His face was full of fear. After the collision, he realized that Lin Ling's strength was heaven-defying. He could not fight, he absolutely could not fight. Where do you think you're going? Lin Ling was awe-inspiring. He raised his sword and attacked. Everyone help me! The Duan lineage martial god could only ask the ancient martial god and the others for help. However, the ancient martial god's face was also pale. He did not dare to speak and was deeply afraid of being implicated. After all, back in the divine world, he had been arrogant in front of Lin Ling. Now, he was afraid that Lin Ling would settle the score. Bullshit, Duan lineage martial god. This is a disaster that you created. Go and solve it yourself. The ancient martial god shouted angrily. I have always thought that Lin Ling was very fair as the judge. Who would have thought that you would oppose him for your own selfish reasons? Ancient martial god. Fuck you. The Duan lineage martial god could not help but curse when he heard this. This was because the ancient martial god had been on the same side as him. When he had opposed Lin Ling, the ancient martial god had shouted even louder than the Duan lineage martial god. Lin Ling, do you want me to help you? However, what made him even angrier was that the ancient martial god had not only refused to help, but he had also added insult to injury. Get lost. However, Lin Ling did not give the ancient martial god any face. He slashed his sword at the ancient martial god, causing the latter to dodge frantically. Fortunately, the sword was only a warning. Even so, the ancient martial god still hid far away, not daring to even breathe loudly. How arrogant! The crowd watched as Lin Ling chased after the Duan lineage martial god with his sword. They felt as if they were dreaming. They did not expect Lin Ling, who had always kept a low profile, to be so arrogant after unleashing his full strength. Martial god Qingning, help me. I did help you last time. The Duan lineage martial god was running for his life. However, when he realized that his life was in danger, he quickly asked martial god Qingning for help. Martial god Zizai, do you still remember the trip to One World Mountain? I fought alongside you and resisted the suction force of the volcano. We escaped from the whirlpool of the volcano together. Don't you remember our friendship? Chapter 4274. That's right, that's right. If the Spirit Kingdom dares to come, I'll be the first to fight. Seeing this, the Duan lineage martial god hurriedly took advantage of the situation. He no longer had his usual domineering appearance. Hearing this, Lin Ling finally stopped in his tracks. It was not that he thought that the Duan lineage martial god would be the first to fight against the Spirit Kingdom, but he suddenly remembered that the Duan lineage martial god seemed to be a person of a certain god. If he rashly killed him, then it would be difficult for Lei Gong to explain himself. Also, he would give the carefree sword martial god and the other some face. Duan lineage martial god. You're really lucky. However, the next time you meet me, you'd better run far away. Otherwise, I'll raise my sword and kill you. Putting away the tyrant song sword, Lin Ling coldly snorted. Yes, yes, yes. Yes. The Duan lineage martial god hurriedly nodded. How could he dare to provoke a madman like Lin Ling? Only Lin Ling could kill a martial god with a sword in the entire 9 prefectures void. I don't object, I don't object. Yes. Next, he raised his hand and said that he approved of Lin Ling being the referee. The other martial god kings also raised their hands one after another. At the beginning, Lin Ling was still considered gentle, challenging them one by one. However, when the battle became heated up, he even raised his sword and killed the martial god. Who would dare to object? Perhaps only the first and second place, Luli Empress and the others, had the qualifications to fight against Lin Ling. Since no one objects, then let's begin to redefine the 10 great martial gods of the 9 prefectures. However, I feel that after the 9 prefectures' investiture, the 10 great martial gods are still a little lacking. Therefore, I suggest that the 10 great martial gods become the 12 great martial gods. Lin Ling landed on the ground and said as he walked, "Of course, this is only my suggestion. After all, I'm a person of a god, and it's not easy for me to interfere in the matters of the 9 prefectures void." 12 martial gods? So many? Hearing this, someone blinked in surprise. However, as soon as he finished speaking, Lin Ling stopped and looked over coldly. His eyes were full of murderous intent. Although he didn't say a word, the old man was so scared that he raised his hand and laughed. Not a bad suggestion. 12 sounds better than 10. I agree. Everyone was speechless. Lin Ling had just finished saying that this was only a suggestion. Whether or not they agreed to this suggestion depended on everyone. However, the other person had only said a sentence out of curiosity. Lin Ling had immediately used his domineering strength to intimidate the other person into agreeing. I approve. Me too. Following that, many people said with flattering smiles, "Who would dare to resist? What I hate the most is using force. Since everyone has agreed, it means that you all approve of my proposal. Now, let's begin the fight for the position of martial god." Lin Ling nodded and walked toward the God Slayer Alliance. Hearing this, the bitter smiles on everyone's faces became even more pronounced. Wasn't this just using force? Even the 4 gods aren't as domineering as you. Following that, the fight for the position of martial god officially began. Big brother, go ahead. Young Master Yao, you guys go all out too. Lin Ling said to Sakura and the others. Sakura and young Master Yao looked at each other, their eyes full of fighting spirit. Now that Lin Ling had built a fighting platform for them, they had to fight well. Rumble. Soon, a fierce battle broke out. Because there were 2 more positions of martial god, many people on the god list and Stairway to Heaven went up to compete. Lin Ling looked at the battles calmly and nodded slightly. After the investiture of the gods, the strength of the entire 9 prefectures had increased greatly. In this way they could fight against the Spirit Nation. However, the Spirit Nation couldn't be underestimated. With the indigo spiritual flower, they could cultivate a large number of experts. With the support of the Spirit Nation, given time, they would surpass the 9 prefectures sooner or later. Now, it's just the calm before the storm. Lin Ling closed his eyes and started to cultivate. Now that he was at the level 9 martial god realm, he could make a breakthrough at any time. However, Lin Ling didn't make a breakthrough. This was because breaking through a realm wasn't of much help. His goal was to break through the martial god realm and step into the deity realm. Therefore, he was more focused on comprehending the Bodhi-proof superpower. It's so comfortable. What is this feeling? The surrounding people were still watching the battle. However, at this moment, an incomparably comfortable feeling spread over their bodies, making them feel extremely relaxed. This made them look around and suddenly, their gazes fell on Lin Ling. It's Lin Ling. The people finally realized something. What kind of power is this? Why do I feel like I'm close to him? Even the unrestrained sword martial god and the others were astounded. Their gazes toward Lin Ling were filled with complicated emotions. Back when they were at the final world and the Kaiyuan River, Lin Ling was like a junior. The unrestrained sword martial god and martial god Qingning had given Lin Ling a hand when they noticed his outstanding talents and personality. However, they suddenly felt like they were looking up at Lin Ling now. It was as if they were looking at a real god. It seems like Lin Ling is the one who has made the biggest leap in the martial god realm. Martial god Qingning exclaimed while shaking his head. Lin Ling was completely unaware of the complicated thoughts in the crowd's minds. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. On the contrary, wisps of the Bodhi light appeared in his soul, protecting it like a godly light. The Bodhi chants echoed openly too. This also made Lin Ling feel his soul light up, as if he had seen something. It was the Patriarch Bodhi whom he had met by luck. In Lin Ling's soul force, the illusion of Patriarch Subhuti was also faintly discernible. However, Lin Ling could sense that a powerful consciousness was carrying his soul, breaking through the endless void and arriving at a world of primordial chaos. It was suppressed above a mass of pitch-black clouds. This cloud of mist was very strange. It seemed to be pitch black, but upon closer inspection, it turned into an azure blue color. Gradually, it turned purple, red, and yellow. It seemed to be constantly changing. Furthermore, the clouds seemed to be still, giving off a peaceful feeling. However, there was a hint of a storm within the calm. What is this? Lin Ling's soul power locked onto the cloud. But soon after, he noticed that there seemed to be a few huge consciousnesses around the mysterious cloud. They were also staring at the cloud. You're here. Suddenly, one of the consciousnesses communicated with Lin Ling. Rumble. However, as soon as the communication arrived, a powerful soul force rushed over and scattered Lin Ling's soul force. When Lin Ling woke up, he realized that he was still at the Yellow Sea. What happened? What powerful consciousnesses? If my soul force is 70,000, those consciousnesses must have reached 1,000,000. Lin Ling was shocked. What happened just now felt like a dream, but everything felt so real. Chapter 4275. Shaking his head, Lin Ling couldn't think of anything else, so he simply ignored it. Then, he glanced at the battle between the martial gods and realized that the battle was still intense. However, a few powerful martial artists had been born. Of course, Lin Ling didn't care much about the martial gods of the 9 prefectures. Therefore, when he sensed his soul power, he was surprised to find that his soul power had unknowingly reached 80,000 levels. It had increased by 10,000 levels. The speed of improvement is so crazy. Could it be that I encountered some kind of opportunity before? Lin Ling was delighted and immediately cultivated the Bodhi Testimony Divine technique again. However, this time, the effect was weak and he couldn't find the same feeling as before. This also caused Lin Ling to give up on comprehending it. His helpless gaze fell on the battle between the martial gods. Lin Ling could see that his big brother and young demon lord were about to become the martial gods of the 9 prefectures. Although they were ranked at the bottom, at least it was a big improvement. As time passed, the 12 martial gods of the 9 provinces were finally confirmed. Among them, young Master Yao and Big Brother were at the bottom of the 12 martial gods of the 9 provinces. As for Black Crow Old Man's departure, this position was seized by a mysterious woman. Of course, although the other martial gods weren't defeated, their positions were still precarious. They could be surpassed at any time, or even eliminated. This battle for the position of the martial gods of the 9 prefectures was finally over. It could be assumed that after tomorrow, the news would spread throughout the 9 prefectures. Let's go. Okay. Lin Ling stood up and pretended to announce the names of the martial gods, acting as a referee. Then, he led the members of the God Slayer Alliance out of this realm. Haha, Digu Martial God, my new title. Impressive. Haha. Haha. While walking, Indra and young Demon Lord were obviously very excited. After they became the strongest 12 martial gods in the 9 regions, they also had their own titles. Among them, Sakra gave himself the name of Digu Martial God. Although this name made Lin Ling feel that it was very unpleasant to hear, Sakra was very happy and never tired of it. As for the young Demon Lord, he used the name of the ancient demon tribe and called himself the Ancient Martial God. Looking at the God Slayer Alliance, they were also in high spirits. This was because the God Slayer Alliance now had 2 more true kings of the 9 provinces. This undoubtedly made the God Slayer Alliance one of the top forces in the 9 provinces and showed signs of surpassing the new heavenly court. Like the Duan clan, there was no comparison at all. When they returned to the final world, the entire 9 provinces were in an uproar. Because no one had expected that the 9 provinces would undergo a change after the gods returned to their positions. The 10 martial gods had become 12 martial gods. Of course, the battle in the Yellow Sea had also shaken the 9 prefectures. Among them, the domineering scene of Lin Ling killing the martial god with a sword was incessantly praised and admired by countless people. As for Duan Wuhan, who had become famous after being stepped on by Lin Ling, that would be a disgrace. It would cause the entire Duan family to lose face. Now, after the battle with the Yellow Sea, Lin Ling was in the limelight. He was even more terrifying than before. In many people's hearts, Lin Ling had already become an overlord. At this moment, in the Kaiyuan River, the 5 major clans had heard about Lin Ling from the cultivators who had entered the Kaiyuan River for training. They were all overjoyed because Lin Ling was their totem. Now that he had become the overlord of the 9 provinces, the 5 major clans naturally wouldn't dare to provoke him. In the Qing Prefecture and the Spirit Prefecture, the 3rd princess and Lin Ling's master had also heard the news. Naturally, they were proud of Lin Ling. Moreover, they had heard from others that there were a few overlords in the 9 provinces that they absolutely couldn't provoke. One of them was Lin Ling of the God Slayer Alliance. This news undoubtedly made them very proud. Looking at Lin Ling, he didn't know that the moment he left the Yellow Sea, the news had already spread to the entire 9 provinces. He was still talking and laughing with Yu Yu and the others as they continued to move forward. Looking at the vast void in the distance, Lin Ling's heart was filled with emotions. He thought back to when he first came to the martial god world, the 9 provinces and the final world. At that time, he was filled with curiosity and yearning for the vast void. In the following thousands of years, he had traveled through half of the void and explored it. He had swept through various forbidden lands and defeated countless experts. Now, unknowingly, he seemed to have become a towering figure in the void of the 9 provinces. Thinking of this, Lin Ling turned to look at Yu Yu and the others. When Yu Yu and the others noticed Lin Ling's gaze, they smiled. They also realized that thousands of years had passed without them noticing. It felt as if time had passed in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, we have also gone through a long period of time. Lin Ling held his wife's hands and said with a smile. Now, Lin Ling could be considered an old monster who had cultivated for almost 10,000 years. If he were in Wuxia, he would definitely scare many people to death. Yes, I used to hear people call us old monsters. But now, we are also old monsters. Yu Yu said with a smile. And Yue and the others also burst into laughter when they heard her words. The term old monster did make people feel strange. If you call me old monsters, then you are also beautiful old monsters. Lin Ling said with a smile as he stroked each of his wives' faces. In the distance, the people of the God Slayer Alliance also retreated far away, not daring to disturb this warm scene. Hee, the big leader is so good. He has so many beautiful wives. Someone laughed. You are courting death. If the big leader hears you, he will skin you alive. Someone next to him slapped the back of that person's head, making him smile awkwardly and not dare to refute. Let's stay away from the big leader and not disturb him. Then, one of the leaders said indifferently. After that, the nearly 100,000 people of the God Slayer Alliance slowed down and let Lin Ling and the others go first. Now, Lin Ling's prestige in their hearts had reached the sky. No one was dissatisfied with this big leader. Lin Ling naturally noticed their little movements. He shook his head and smiled. Then, he led his wives forward again. To him, it was better that no one disturbed him. He could accompany Yu Yu and the others to walk in the void. This was also the promise that Lin Ling had made to Yu Yu and the others back then. In the past, although Lin Ling had tried to take Yu Yu and the others to walk in the void, he had to be careful because he had many enemies. Now, Lin Ling was not afraid of anyone. Unless the gods personally took action, only then could they suppress Lin Ling. However, the 4 great gods obviously would not take action against Lin Ling. If there was an enemy in the void of the 9 prefectures that could threaten Lin Ling, it might only be the Spirit Nation. Of course, this only represented the enemies that Lin Ling knew. For example, the Black Crow old man not long ago belonged to the type that Lin Ling did not know about. That was hard to say. Chapter 4276. At the very front, there was a gorgeous palace floating there. It was pulled by 49 snow heavenly horses. Although it didn't seem to be fast, it was very ostentatious because the palace was very gorgeous. There were a lot of enchantments on the surface, and those who were knowledgeable would know that the palace had a world of its own. It could become a world and change into any scene. Snow, summer, autumn, and even green mountains and clear waters. To create such a palace, the effort needed was definitely not small. Looking at the snow heavenly horses, it was said that they were the mounts of the snow god. They had the divine embryo jade bones and were snow spirits. They represented purity and infinity. Even in the entire 9 provinces, they were incomparably noble existences and priceless. Only a few big shots were qualified to ride them. However, to use 49 snow heavenly horses in one trip, this showed the owner's origin even more. This is Miao Shen's true inheritance, right? It should be a boundary god who passed through here. This place was very close to the final world, so there were a lot of martial artists nearby. When they saw the gorgeous scene, they were all shocked. The direction is wrong, lead the way. At this time, the cold voice sounded again. Then, the lightning whip was swung out and landed on the bodies of the people leading the horses, causing them to tremble as if they were struck by lightning. After gritting their teeth, they didn't say anything and continued to lead the horses forward. What a bunch of bastards! The person who swung the whip was a young man wearing a gorgeous robe. He was actually a boundary master with an extremely high level. It's Zhou Tian. Someone recognized the boundary master and knew that he was a supreme golden rune boundary god. An exalted robed world spiritist with golden runes was a world spiritist capable of forging acquired divine artifacts. His status and identity were incomparably high. However, such a world spiritist was actually supervising the horse watchers. This was too strange. Could it be that there's a supreme dragon rune boundary god in that gorgeous palace? Someone suddenly thought of something and exclaimed. A supreme dragon rune boundary god who could forge innate divine tools obviously had a higher status. No wonder why it's so ostentatious. However, there aren't that many supreme dragon robes with Miao God's true teachings. I wonder which supreme dragon robe is inside the palace. That gorgeous palace. Could it be the legendary Heavenly Snow Palace? If that's the case, then that person should be the great world deity Snow Zun. I remember that when this palace appeared 50 years ago, it shook the void of the 9 prefectures. Hey, look at the person pulling the horse, it looks like Princess Tian. Sounds of discussion could be heard. Then, someone pointed to the front in surprise. Princess Tian? The former spokesperson of Miao Xin's true inheritance? Many people were shocked and rubbed their eyes to look. Suddenly, they saw a woman in front of the snow Pegasus with a dozen people. She was leading a snow Pegasus forward. Looking at her, she looked a bit down and her expression was incomparably gloomy. How pitiful. I didn't think that the mighty Princess Tian would end up like this. Someone sighed. Back then, Princess Tian represented Miao Xin's true inheritance in the 9 prefectures. Therefore, many people knew about her and there were many who gave her face. But now, she had become a horse watcher. She was very down and out. Could it be that the legend from 50 years ago is true? After some people were surprised, a gloating smile appeared on their faces. It should be that matter. However, Princess Tian is also quite beautiful. Now that she's not as beautiful as she was back then, I wonder if I can buy her? It's possible. After all, after losing the bet, Princess Tian and the others all belong to the great world deity Snow Zun. If we can move the great world deity Snow Zun, anything is possible. Hee, if I can press this bossy Princess Tian under me, how cool would that be? More and more people smiled and said. Their words could be said to be unscrupulous. These words were undoubtedly heard by Princess Tian, causing her to lower her head even more. Looking at the man called Zhou Tian in front of the palace, he sneered. Not only did he not stop them, he even allowed them to laugh at Princess Tian. It's her. In the distant void, Lin Ling brought Yu and the others over. After seeing Princess Tian, Lin Ling frowned slightly. Of course, he was more focused on the people beside Princess Tian. Because there were more than 10 people beside Princess Tian. Among them there was Long Ya, whom he had met once, and the white-clothed woman, great world deity Snow Tian. And this great world deity Snow Tian was also pulling the horse. It was completely different from the mysterious and noble person in the past. How could this be? Without a doubt, Lin Ling was very puzzled. Brother Ling, you have left for 100 years. Naturally, you don't know that 50 years ago, Tian Shui Great World God also went to the divine realm. However, when she was trying to become a god, for some unknown reason, not only did she fail to become a god, she was even mysteriously sealed, causing all her forging skills to disappear. Yu and the others had followed Lin Ling to God Miao's true inheritance and they had seen Tian Shui Great World Deity before. Apotheosis failed. Upon hearing this, Lin Ling's eyes narrowed. Most importantly, before world deity Tian Shui Great Boundary Deity went to become a god, she made a bet with revered Snow to forge a divine weapon together. Whoever loses will become the other party's slave. However, world deity Tian Shui failed to become a god, causing her to lose in the end. That's why she ended up like this. It wouldn't be good for us to help Tian Shui Great World Deity. And you are added from the side. It seems that this so-called revered Snow should have some grievances with world deity Tian Shui Great World Deity. Upon hearing this, Lin Ling nodded his head. Generally speaking, world spiritists who were both God Miao's true inheritance wouldn't force others into a dead end. Brother Ling, why don't we? Suddenly, Yu Yu looked at Lin Ling with pleading eyes. Lin Ling, although Princess Tian has harmed you many times, I could sense that Princess Tian was very worried about you when you went to the Nine-Layer Mountain. Furthermore, World Deity Tian Shui Great World Deity gave you divine spring water. So why don't you help them? And Yuer added. That can't be. Princess Tian wanted me dead many times. She's worried about me? Furthermore, although World Deity Tian Shui Great World Deity gave me divine spring water, I also gave her quite a bit of reward. Lin Ling looked at Yu Yu and the others in shock. Brother Ling, don't be so stingy. Yu Yu immediately pulled Lin Ling's arm and said coquettishly. I'm scared of you guys. Since his wives all spoke, Lin Ling didn't want them to be unhappy. So, he brought Yu Yu and the others and walked forward. At that moment, World Deity Tian Shui Great World Deity was leading her horse forward with Princess Tian and the others. Naturally, she could sense the mocking gazes from all around. This caused her to bite her lips tightly. In the past, how glorious and awe-inspiring was she? In the entire 9 provinces, the number of people who didn't give her face could be counted with one's fingers. Chapter 4277. The treatment that was as different as heaven and earth was undoubtedly hard for her to accept as she was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. So, she couldn't understand why she failed to become a god. Forget about the failure. Why did her soul power and memory be sealed? Now that she had lost the bet with Shuezun, she naturally knew that the skinny old man would not let her go. If she had not agreed before the bet that she would be a slave but would not sell her everything, she would have to accompany the skinny old man. Thinking of accompanying the skinny old man, she even had the heart to die. After all, she and revered Snow were not on good terms from the beginning. We are both true disciples of God Miao. Why do we have to force each other to death? At this moment, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded. Then, the voice stopped in front of the palace. There were a total of 4 people, and they were fighting quietly. Naturally, they were imposing. They actually made the 49 snow horses stop in their tracks. They looked extremely obedient. The sudden change made Tian Shui Great Boundary God, Princess Tian and the others look up. There were 4 people standing in front of them. The leader was a handsome young man. He wore a blue and white robe and his long hair was tied behind his head. He looked calm but there was an aura of a superior. It's him. Tian Shui Great Boundary God quivered. Lin Ling. Princess Tian's eyes dilated. Almost at the same time, they had complicated thoughts in their minds. But more than that, they felt inferior and they felt ashamed. Because they didn't know why, they didn't want Lin Ling to see them in such dire straits. It's Lin Ling. Of course, not only them, even Longya who was next to them looked pale and his eyes were complicated. Back then, in Miao Shen's true inheritance, he had looked down on Lin Ling. He had thought Lin Ling was a crude barbarian, while he was a noble world spiritist. However, looking at it now, Lin Ling was clearly nobler than him, while he was only a horse driver. Lin Ling, you're here to laugh at us, right? If so, please laugh. Tian Shui Great Boundary God clenched her teeth and suddenly said. Seeing someone blocking their way, the young man called Jiao Tian was originally unhappy. But after hearing what Tian Shui Great Boundary God said, he laughed. It turned out that he was here to laugh at them. Great. So he didn't stop Lin Ling. No, I'm here to help you. Lin Ling looked at Tian Shui Great Boundary God indifferently. We don't need your help. You can leave. Tian Shui the World God was once a supreme dragon inscription gown. How could he swallow his pride? Originally, I didn't plan to help, but my wife insisted. So I had no choice but to help. Of course, if you think it's humiliating, you can repay me with something after it's over. That way, we won't owe each other anything. Lin Ling continued. His words made World Deity Tian Shui clench her teeth and she was at a loss for words. Because, Lin Ling didn't plan to help them. It was only a transaction. That way, Tian Shui Great Boundary God and the others felt that their dignity was preserved. Give me some face and let them go. How about it? Lin Ling looked at the gorgeous palace and said. What? You're not here to laugh at them but to save them? What kind of joke are you making? The young man called Jiao Tian was stunned. Then he said furiously, Who do you think you are? Do you think you're qualified to kill them? He waved the whip in his hand as if he was giving an order. However, at the same time as he waved the whip, Many boundary seals appeared. The snowy Pegasi's eyes turned red and they seemed to go crazy. Obviously, the snowy Pegasi were controlled by the boundary seals. Now that the order was given, they immediately charged towards Lin Ling. The originally beautiful snowy Pegasi suddenly became malevolent and ferocious. They doubled in size and were incomparably ferocious. Humph. Let's see if you're still alive. Once the boundary seals are released, unless it's a god, no one can stop the crazy snowy Pegasi. And the crazy snowy Pegasi, any martial god would have to avoid them. Zhou Tian sneered and revealed an expression of, "You dare to spoil my good thing. You know how to write regret." Rumble. The crazy snowy Pegasi charged out from behind the palace. They were getting closer and closer to Lin Ling and the others. "Lin Ling, be careful," Princess Tian shouted anxiously. Although she saw that Lin Ling's strength was very strong last time in Heaven Pass City, the snowy Pegasi were no small matter. They possessed jade bones. The jade bones were a type of divine embryo. In addition, there were so many of them. Who in the martial god realm could stop them? However, Lin Ling didn't care about her shout. His eyes coldly looked forward. He didn't have any intention of retreating. This made people cry out in surprise. They thought that the young man was stupid. Stop! But at this moment, Lin Ling finally let out a stern shout. His voice was like thunder, forming an invisible aura that intimidated everyone. Everyone felt a strong gust of wind blowing against their faces, blowing their long hair, and a sense of fear rose in their hearts. Lu. The snow Pegasus horses that were previously in a frenzy all raised their front hooves and stomped down heavily. Then they all stopped. The horses were breathing heavily, but the madness in their eyes had quietly disappeared. They revealed a look of reverence and obedience. One of the snowy Pegasi was closest to Lin Ling. It was so close that Lin Ling could reach out and touch it. "You guys go back." Being trapped by someone, this is not a snowy Pegasi that yearns for freedom. Lin Ling gently stroked the horse. Under his words, the horse let out a neigh and then ran in another direction. Behind it, a large number of snowy Pegasi galloped in the void. From afar, it looked like a heavenly steed soaring through the sky. It was very beautiful. "Where are you guys going? Get back here." Seeing the snowy Pegasi running away, Zhou Tian was furious. He kept casting barriers in an attempt to control the snowy Pegasi. However, there was no response. He could only watch as the snowy Pegasi ran further and further away before finally disappearing. How would he know that Lin Ling's shout earlier, which was mixed with a terrifying soul power, easily destroyed the sealing barrier in the snowy Pegasi's body? "You're courting death. You actually let my horse go." After Zhou Tian was furious, he immediately looked at Lin Ling. The whip in his hand fiercely lashed towards Lin Ling. However, it was easily received by Lin Ling. Moreover, in his palm, a strong force was reflected back, immediately causing Zhou Tian to vomit blood and retreat. Moreover, the whip in his hand also turned into powder. "Originally, I wanted to see what I could use to buy Heavenly Snow Great World God and the others. However, it's a pity that you attacked me. With such a rude action, you only have two choices. 1. You die. 2. You live. However, I want to bring Heavenly Snow Great World God and the others away." Throwing away the powder in his hand, Lin Ling said indifferently. "What?" Zhou Tian's pupils dilated. He only lashed his whip once and the blue-robed young man wanted his life? Chapter 4278. Bullshit. Who do you think you are? I, Zhou Tian, have lived for so long and this is the first time I've met someone who wants my life with a whip. My life is right here. Let's see what qualifications you have to take it. Zhou Tian shouted coldly. Then, not only did he not want to give his life, he wanted to take the life of the blue-robed young man. Moreover, the ladies beside the blue-robed young man were very beautiful. Then, he would take them all and bring them back to be maids. Zhou Tian, don't be rude. However, at that moment, an old voice came from the palace that had been silent. Then the voice said with dignity, "Little friend, if you really want to protect them, be careful not to take a wrong step. Thank you for your advice, but when I do things, right or wrong isn't important. What's important is whether I've decided to do it or not. Now I've decided." Lin Ling looked at the luxurious palace and said calmly, "You want Zhou Tian's life to exchange for Tian Shui and the others? Do you think you're qualified to do it?" Silence. The palace was silent for a moment. Suddenly, a voice came again. That's right. What qualifications do you have? Silence. Zhou Tian, who had the support of the great world spirit god Shuezun, was also in high spirits as he pointed at Lin Ling and scolded. Do you know who my teacher is? If I tell you, you'll be scared to death. Silence. He's the supreme dragon mark robe of Miao Shen's true teachings. Do you know what a dragon mark is? You country boy, you're a frog at the bottom of the well, ignorant. Silence. In front of the supreme dragon mark robe, you're just a fart. Zhou Tian spat out his saliva. He was really humiliated by Lin Ling before. Hearing that, Lin Ling smiled and didn't say anything. He looked at Zhou Tian as if he was looking at a clown. However, his smile made people think that Lin Ling was afraid. After all, in front of the supreme dragon mark robe, as long as one had common sense, they would know that they couldn't afford to offend him. Moreover, in front of the supreme dragon mark robe, you're just a fart. Zhou Tian said. However, at that moment, a large number of figures came from afar. Their auras were rolling and they surrounded the void tightly. What happened? Many people no longer had the time to laugh at Lin Ling. They looked around in surprise. What terrified them was that this group of experts had monstrous strength. They were people who could shake the entire void of the 9 prefectures with a single move. It's the God Slayer Alliance. When someone caught sight of the leader of the ancient demons, they finally reacted. Moreover, all the leaders of the God Slayer Alliance have come. Heavens, this is a rare sight. The others also looked around, and when those mighty figures got closer and closer, their hearts skipped a beat. The God Slayer Alliance was now a colossus in the 9 prefectures void. For the past 100 years, all the battles in the 9 prefectures void were related to them. Moreover, they had a lot of leaders. It was said that the number of leaders had reached more than 100. However, these leaders rarely gathered together. Being able to see all the leaders at once was a dream. God Slayer Alliance. Zhou Tian's legs went soft, and he started to panic. Although the true disciples of God Miao had an unsurpassable status in the 9 prefectures, not everyone would give them face. The God Slayer Alliance was one of them. Moreover, he had heard that the members of the God Slayer Alliance were a bunch of lunatics. Moreover, their leader was rumored to be a follower of a deity. He was arrogant and had a strong background. Now, the entire God Slayer Alliance had arrived. What were they going to do? For a moment, the scene was very quiet. People did not even dare to breathe loudly. They could only watch as the God Slayer Alliance arrived. I am his qualification. After the people of God Miao's true disciples were tightly surrounded, a man walked out in a domineering manner. His qualification? Zhou Tian could not help but point at Lin Ling and then at the God Slayer Alliance. He had no idea what the relationship between Lin Ling and the God Slayer Alliance was. In his confusion, he subconsciously asked, You, who are you? Martial God Digu, one of the 12 great martial gods of the 9 prefectures. The man said indifferently. The 12 great martial gods of the 9 prefectures? Aren't they the 10 great martial gods? Idiot, after yesterday's battle in the Yellow Sea, the number of martial gods has increased to 12. Your information is too outdated. Ah, then this martial god Digu is one of the 12 martial god kings. People exclaimed repeatedly. They had never imagined that they would be able to see such a legendary figure. I am the ancient martial god, one of the 12 martial gods of the 9 prefectures. I am also his qualification. At this moment, young Master Yao also walked out and said indifferently. Another one of the 12 martial gods of the 9 prefectures. People's astonishment could be said to be one wave after another. I am the unrestrained sword martial god. I am also his qualification. However, another person walked out, causing people to explode with surprise. They looked at Zhou Tian again. He quietly stepped back, his hand holding the palace as his arm trembled. I am the martial god Qingning. I am also his qualification. I am a Yuan venerate martial god. I am also his qualification. Powerhouses walked out one after another. Each of them was a figure who could shake the 9 prefectures and had absolute authority in the void. And these people were actually the qualification of the blue-robed young man. Who was that young man? This is a misunderstanding. You are all his qualification. I don't know who he is. Jiao Tian's body continued to tremble, and he couldn't even stand steadily. That blue-robed young man was so arrogant because his connections were so strong. He really didn't know where he got the means to curry favor with so many powerhouses. However, he was a true disciple of God Miao and had countless treasures. If that young man could curry favor with these powerhouses, perhaps he could do the same. Jiao Tian's imagination ran wild and he suddenly became excited. If he could curry favor with the God Slayer Alliance, TSKSK, just thinking about it made him feel impressive. Who would dare to provoke him in the 9 prefectures? Thinking of this, Jiao Tian looked at the crowd with excitement in his eyes. Who is he? He is our great leader. However, at this moment, Indra spoke again calmly. That's right, he is our great leader. Young Master Yao also nodded. It doesn't matter. Regardless of whether he is a great leader or a little leader, I feel that there is no such thing as hatred or love for no reason in this world. Sometimes, benefits are the most important thing. Therefore, great leaders, let's talk about benefits. Jiao Tian spoke frankly with assurance. However, halfway through his speech, he suddenly blinked and even his nose was running. His nose also flowed out and hung for an inch. He said apprehensively. He is the great leader? Clearly, he had finally reacted and knew what a great leader represented. Yes. The God Slayer Alliance nodded in unison. The legendary great leader of your God Slayer Alliance? Jiao Tian asked again. If he hadn't held onto the palace, he would have already slid to the ground. Yes. The God Slayer Alliance nodded again. Bang. Chapter 4279. Damn it. The person he met was actually Lin Ling? Of course, he wasn't the only one who was shocked. The surrounding warriors were also shocked. That was because the battle in the Yellow Sea that shook the entire 9 prefectures happened just yesterday. And today, they met this legendary character. He's Lin Ling. Wow, so young. KSK. So this is what the legendary character looks like. I wonder if he'll feel any pressure after leading so many experts from the God Extermination Alliance. I thought that meeting revered Snow World deity today was already an extremely lucky thing. In the end, I even met the legendary son of demon, Lin Ling. Following that, the crowd shouted excitedly. That was because it wasn't easy to meet a legendary character. Since when did Lin Ling become so famous? The clamor caused Tian Shui World deity to frown. She had been trapped all this while, so she didn't know that Lin Ling's reputation was like the sun in midday. When she saw how excited the crowd was and how Jiao Tian was so scared that his nose was running, all sorts of feelings welled up in her heart. Beside her, Princess Tian felt the same. When she met Lin Ling in Heaven Pass City previously, Lin Ling didn't seem to be welcomed. And now, he was extremely popular. Everyone's eyes were filled with admiration and reverence. Senior Lin Ling. I'm your follower. Your battle, your steps. I've recorded everything. I've always admired you. Can you give me an autograph? It was so exaggerated that someone blushed and asked. However, this request was stopped by the people from the God Extermination Alliance. Furthermore, if there weren't people from the God Extermination Alliance here, this place would have been in chaos. You're Lin Ling? In the palace that had been silent all this while, a cry of surprise sounded. It was revered Snow World deity. Then, the palace was opened and a skinny old man rushed out. His eyes were fixed on Lin Ling. He obviously didn't expect Lin Ling to appear here. He also didn't expect that Lin Ling would appear for Tian Shui World deity. Lin Ling looked at him indifferently. He could also feel that the old man's soul force was not weak. Tian Shui, I didn't expect you to be so lucky. You actually know Lin Ling. The old man suddenly clenched his teeth and did not dare to say anything to Lin Ling. Instead, he looked at Tian Shui furiously. It could be seen that the grudge between him and Great Universe God Tian Shui was not small. Especially when he saw that Great Universe God Tian Shui knew a big shot like Lin Ling, he was extremely jealous. Humph, Senior Snow, I know you're angry, but the angrier you are, the happier I am. Seeing that, Tian Shui Great World Deity suddenly smiled and felt indescribably carefree. She had never imagined that one day, she would actually use Lin Ling to suppress her opponent. Fine. I admit that I underestimated you. However, if you want to leave and I don't agree, no one can plead for you. The old man humphed coldly. Then, He looked at Lin Ling without restraint. His meaning was obvious. I won't let him go. What can you do? Don't tell me you dare to provoke God Miao's true disciple. You really don't want face. Seeing that, Lin Ling sneered. The tyrannical song sword appeared in his hand and he slashed at Jiu Tian. Swoosh! A sword mark appeared on Jiu Tian's neck. He pointed at Lin Ling and wanted to say something. But in the end, he didn't say anything and died. Killed with one slash. Moreover, he killed God Miao's true disciple's golden rune supreme robe right in front of them. Lin Ling, you're crazy. Senior Snow obviously didn't expect Lin Ling to be so daring. He contradicted me. I said before that I must kill him. Lin Ling held his sword and said coldly. You're too overbearing. He only waved his whip at you and you actually killed him. Do you really think you're a god? Senior Snow was even more furious. However, he also knew that a great character like Lin Ling was temperamental. He didn't need any excuse to take someone's life. After all, experts all had dignity. How could an expert be provoked by an ant? So Senior Snow clenched his teeth and said, Let me tell you. You killed my disciple. I will not let Heavenly Snow Great World Boundary God and the others go. Moreover, just you wait. I will inform our Purple Rune Supreme Robe about this. He will definitely report this to Lei Gong and punish you. There was only one Purple Rune Supreme Robe in the entire 9 provinces. He was the strongest world boundary master in God Miao's true disciples. Even the 4 gods had to give him face. However, would Lin Ling be afraid of the Purple Rune Supreme Robe? Very good. With your threat, this is equivalent to provoking me. Then, as the price, I will take Heavenly Snow Great World Boundary God and the others away. Lin Ling sneered and said in a domineering manner. Lin Ling's words shocked everyone. Lin Ling wanted to take Xuezun away unconditionally just because of a threat from Xuezun. This was indeed domineering and unreasonable. In your dreams. Do you think I'm an idiot? Senior Snow was clearly angered silly. He thought that he was already very domineering. However, compared to Lin Ling was the one who was truly domineering and unreasonable. Scolding me? Another crime. However, who knew that Lin Ling's smile became even more brilliant and he slashed with his sword. Great heavenly horn. Senior Snow's expression changed when he saw that. A purple conch appeared in his hand and he waved it in the air. The sound of a tsunami could be heard and endless seawater gushed out from the conch shell. This was the water from the divine realm. One must know that the pressure from the divine realm was very great. The strength of the powerful warriors in the 9 provinces would be suppressed in the divine realm. Thus, the water from the divine realm was naturally no small matter. To some ordinary martial artists, even a drop of this liquid was a rare heavenly treasure. Xiao. However, Lin Ling's sword did not stop. Splitting the water and breaking the sea, it slashed on the purple conch shell and the shell exploded. Ah! The wrinkles on Senior Snow's old face increased and he let out a strange cry. He did not care about the treasure and immediately rushed into the palace. Lin Ling, you're dead. You're dead. Today, not only will I not let them go, when I return, I will send all of them to hell and let them suffer the 9 times 9 law calamity. Ha ha ha, originally they were just humiliated. They did not have to suffer such calamity. It's all because of you. After hiding in the palace, Senior Snow let out a crazy voice. This Senior World Spirit God Snow is crazy. Everyone was shocked by Senior Snow's attitude. How was he a Senior World Spirit God? He was simply a crazy old man. Clang! Lin Ling's face was expressionless, but the sword in his hand continued to slash out, landing on the magnificent palace. There were only rumbling sounds, but the palace remained unscathed. One must know that Lin Ling's sword could easily slash through 10,000 realms. From this, one could see how powerful the Flying Snow Palace was. So hard. Sakura and the others were shocked. They then attacked one after another and bombarded the palace. Rumble!